Evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Crucible. Tonight we got Mouthy Infidel going up against Pedro. It's going to be Calvinism against Utilitarianism. I've been looking forward to this one. Because Pedro is my partner and I'm a Christian myself, I'm going to actually recuse myself from moderating this, and I invited Tom Foolery in to assist me. Thanks for coming in tonight, Tom. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate you having me on.
So Tom will be moderating the debate. You'll still see me, but I'll be mostly in the background taking notes. After the debate is over, I'll ask questions like I normally do. Before I bring all of the debaters out and we introduce them, I just wanted to say one more thing, which is that we appreciate the continuous donations that keep coming in from our fan base. It makes a world of difference, and it's what allows us to have all of these continual improvements. So we'll be right back in just a second. And we're back, and it's going to be some intellectual blood sports tonight. Tom, thanks again for coming on. I certainly appreciate it. First and foremost, I'll introduce you back to my partner, Pedro Bog. You've seen him here, but he's here tonight to wreck some skulls. How you doing tonight, Pedro?
I'm so thankful for finally being able to find someone who's willing to step up to the plate and debate me on a religious topic. It's my bread and butter. So I'm very thankful for my opponent tonight, who's obviously Mouthy Infidel, to come on.
And next we've got Mouthy Infidel. How you doing, Mouthy? Been a little while since you got a haircut, I see.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I'm still not entirely clear on what I'm gonna be debating. And religious topics are very much not my bread and butter, but I'm still excited to have a conversation. So I guess we'll see how it
Half the
pans
fun
out.
is he has to attack utilitarianism. So I feel like that's a hell of a road to hoe too. Mouthy Infidel, where can everybody find you?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at Mouthy Infidel or on Twitter at Mouthy Infidel. I think those are all the social media platforms I have.
Weren't you thinking about changing your name or some shit?
Yeah, I was. I still can't think of like a different name to use.
I feel like maybe one will come out of this debate. We'll see. Maybe one will come out of this debate. So Pedro's going to open in this debate, Tom, and then it'll move over to Mouthy. The rules are they both have 7 minutes for their intro, and then we'll open up the floor between them. I don't foresee that we're going to have any trouble. This will be a full contact debate. With that, I'm going to turn the floor over to Tom, and Pedro can open.
Gotcha. Okay. Tom, I actually prepared my opening statement, so I'll just present it right now.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So if I am moderating, normally I'm going to try to stay out as much as possible. You guys can interrupt each other when you want, unless somebody says like, hey, I want to keep talking, or unless it seems egregious, I'm normally going to allow interruptions. But I don't have a way to mute people. So if I jump in, I just ask that everybody stop talking when I try to jump in. But outside of that, go ahead, Pedro.
Understood. But now, thus says the Lord, He who created you, O Jacob, He who formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name, and you are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, and the flame shall not consume you. For I am the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, your Savior. I give Egypt as your ransom, Cush and Sheba in exchange for you, because you are precious in my eyes and honored, and I love you. I give men in return for you, peoples in exchange for your life. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and from the west I will gather you. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made. The gospel is that the sovereign triune God of Scripture brought all that there is or ever will be of creation into being through his decree to glorify himself in making his power known through his wrath and justice against sin, and the demonstration of his grace and mercy through the redemption of a particular people accomplished in the incarnation of the Son and the outpouring of the Holy Spirit. In this debate, I will be promoting, answering for, and therefore defending the Reformed position of biblical morals and ethics, and questioning the utilitarian position on the same subjects. In this opening statement, I will take the time to answer some of the common objections levied toward the God of the Bible so that we can move the conversation forward, making the distinction between the positions and really any other apart from the Reform's understanding that one system presents zero ability to compensate, account for, or give any real meaning to any evil in the world, while the other does. First, we attack the is God the author of evil question directly. The classical view is that God freely ordained whatsoever has come to pass for the purpose of glorifying himself. This is reflected directly in Isaiah 46:10 and Ephesians 1:11. What this means is that any act or event, no matter how emotionally charged, gut-wrenching, big or small, absolutely whatsoever you think is bad or good, has come about to be raised to the glory of God in the demonstration of either his justice or his grace. The distinction with merit that must be made in answering this question addressing acts of evil committed out in the world is primary movers and secondary means. What the evildoer meant, well, for evil, God meant for good. The good being in any act of evil to the good of his glory being demonstrated in the execution of his justice, in his wrath against sin, or his grace in his mercy and forgiveness. No evil act in our world goes unpaid for. Any and every form of sin in the world is not only defeated, but used as an instrument to demonstrate his sovereignty over creation. This is reflected directly in Genesis 50, Isaiah 10, and Acts 4. Where the real problem lies in this discussion, not just for my opponent tonight, but all sects outside of the Reformed position on how they explain the pure existence of evil itself, is one, from my opponent's viewpoint, evil is just here. We cannot trace its origin, and therefore this is just something that happens without any meaning behind it at all. Purposeless evil. Ladies and gentlemen, you are going through the pain you're in right at this moment just for no reason. And two, for my fellow theists out there who may come on or come out with some questions during the Q&A, it lies in the differences of our exegesis and precisely our definition for the word sovereignty. The Reformed define it as the ultimate authority in the decision-making process of the orchestration of the entirety of creation exhaustively in all of its facets and in the maintenance of its established order. Colossians 1:16, Isaiah 25:8, Psalms 115:3, Jeremiah 32:17. The list can go on, but we need to keep this moving. The next one, and we will cut it short here because I wish to handle anything else in the cross-examination, is the accusation that we are annihilating free will, or we have described an unfair God who takes away your choices. First and foremost, on the subject of fair, that is a lie. If things were only fair, the crucifixion would have never taken place, and in our system, the human race would perish. On the subject of free will, we are properly identifying what will we have as creaturely will, which constantly has external bombardment of stimuli around it 24/7 span of its lifetime. No one who actually thinks through this is going to argue against that. And concerning your choice, no one is taking that away at all. You, the listener, have all the choice in the world. We are clarifying the internal influence your will is subject to that affects your choices. These are called your desires. They are produced by your nature, which there are only two, biblically speaking. You either have a nature of a rebellious sinner who hates God and seeks to undermine his will constantly, suppressing the truth, or that of one who has been raised to spiritual life, who is reconciled with and seeks to honor God and glorify him. Both of these natures produce their own desires as described and influence the will's choices in real time. Our stance firmly on this position in this whole argument is that our opponents have no answer, have no explanation, purpose to offer, let alone a solution for the problem of evil that we do. Please listen closely to our discussion, and thank you once again for giving us the opportunity to make the case.
That was a hell of an opening statement there, Pedro. I did want to just quickly read the super chat, Tom. Sorry to cut in support of our brothers, the Crucible, for $10 from the third rail with Omar. Everybody make sure that you like and subscribe to his channel. I'll turn it back to you, Tom.
Black Camera, I don't know if you're able to move the timer, but well, I guess it doesn't matter now unless Maldi has a video as well. It shouldn't matter. All right, Maldi, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess I don't really have much in the way of an opening statement because, like I said, going into this, I wasn't really sure, what exactly was going to be happening here. But I'm starting to get more of a clear focus of what kinds of things we're going to be discussing. And I picked up on sort of two main themes. The first one being the problem of evil, and the second one being the problem of free will. And so it seems like, and don't worry about talking during my opening statement because I just want to ask this question so we can be clear. So is your point sort of that we have these two data points, one of them being evil is something that exists, and the other being free will is something that exists, and your religious view gives us a way to explain those two data points, as in you can give an account of how free will exists and how evil exists, whereas the atheist can't really give an account of that. Is that basically your point?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Our point exactly on our side would be that we can actually provide an ultimate purpose for those 2 points, a why.
Okay, yeah. So you can provide something like an explanation. Okay. So what I would say is that with respect to both points, so I guess we're gonna have a deeper disagreement because when it comes both to the issue of free will and when it comes to the problem of evil, I don't actually think that there is this data to explain here because I don't believe that free will exists, and I don't really believe that evil exists. But I'll say the following things. The first thing I'll say that is that even your account of free will, I don't think really solves the problem, because your explanation was basically that we have this nature, and this nature gives us certain desires, and then these desires cause us to act in certain ways, right? But surely the nature that we have that produces our desires and the desires themselves are not things that are chosen by us. These are not things that we are in control of, right? And so it just seems weird to say that we have free will if ultimately all of our actions are determined by our nature and we don't have any control over what our nature is, right? That seems like that would lead to a determinist position where ultimately we don't have free will. The other thing I would say is that with respect to the problem of evil, again, I don't really think that there is data to explain here because I don't believe in evil. I would say I'm like an anti-realist about values. I think there are things that we consider to be evil. There are, things
Real
that
quick,
we consider to be
I'm
bad.
sorry. BPF, can you mute? Is it already on mute? Somebody's slipping
I'm
into where
muted.
his audio is going down. It might be Pedro.
Okay, maybe Pedro, mute when you're not speaking, maybe.
I'm not muted at all, and I'm not typing.
We're saying
Yeah,
you
I'm
should
also
mute.
not typing.
Maldi's
should mute.
audio
Okay.
keeps dropping off. Yeah, go ahead,
Okay.
Maldi. Sorry about that.
Okay, yeah. So I guess I don't believe in free will, so I don't think it's a virtue of your view that you can explain the existence of free will. But I also don't think that the account you gave of free will actually solves the issue of free will because ultimately on your account, we still don't have ultimate control over the thing that gives us our desires that then causes our actions. And I would say that, when it comes to the problem of evil, while I don't think that evil really exists, I do think that this still is somewhat of a problem for theists, right? Because on the theist worldview, there is a God who is all powerful and all good. And when we say all good, I take it that a theist doesn't just mean that as a tautology. They mean there is this substantive property that we all intuitively understand, that property being good, and God has that substantive property. But it just seems like there is a lot of data points in the world which seem to be not be very would be very surprising on the hypothesis that there is a God who is all powerful and all good. Which is just to say that, like, if we look around at the world around us, there's a lot of evil, there's a lot of suffering. Both in terms of human committed atrocities like the Holocaust, and in addition, we have natural evils like tsunamis and flesh-eating parasites and all of that stuff. And, it would be very surprising if we have a God who created the world, who's all good and all powerful, and this is the world that he created, right? Because why would a God who's all good create a world with insane amounts of needless human suffering? That would seem very surprising. And I don't think I heard like an explanation for that in that opening statement. So, yeah, I guess that's really all I had to say.
No worries.
Okay.
So could I say? Oh, Tom.
Yeah,
go.
thanks guys for your opening statements. And Pedro, yeah, if you want to go ahead and respond, we'll go to open debate.
Understood. So I kind of caught a contradiction there really quick.
Mhm.
You said there's no such thing as evil, correct?
Mhm.
And then later on, you said in your statement right there that there's calamities and catastrophes that happen in the world.
Yeah.
So there is such thing as bad in your worldview.
Well, there are things that we consider to be bad, right? So I don't think that I don't think that I need to be committed to the view that evil is like this real property in the world in order to hold the theist to that standard, right? Because my argument isn't saying that evil is something that exists, and therefore the fact that it exists under the world we create or under the world we see around us is evidence against theism. My argument is like under the theist hypothesis, evil is something that exists. And so it's basically just holding you to your own standard, right? Rather than positing it as my own. If that makes sense, I could elaborate on that more if that doesn't.
No, it makes perfect sense. I'm just trying to figure out, and I sent you in our private chat the transcript for my opening statement.
Mm-hmm.
You said you missed the part where we the theists are trying to give an account for why you're going through these evil things. What is the purpose behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at it, it specifically says every act within time is specifically made for the glorification of God through the exercise of either his justice or the distribution of his grace.
Sure. So I guess, well, okay. So if the problem of evil is basically just saying like, look, okay, I guess it's maybe worth elaborating a little bit on what I mean, right? So firstly, I don't think it's really necessary for the atheist to appeal to any notion of objective morality or evil in order to make an argument from evil. This is basically just because the argument from evil is basically a form of reductio ad absurdum, right? So the argument
that
works.
Means. Tell me that. What does that mean?
So the argument just works by assuming the truth of the conclusion that we're trying to critique and then demonstrating that it leads to absurd results, right? And so in the case of the problem of evil, all that's needed is a recognition that certain states of affairs prevail in the world that possess properties contrary to the purported nature of God, right? And so if the purported nature of God, so for example, right, natural disasters and diseases cause millions of people to suffer and die for no apparent purpose, right? Such occurrences are contrary to God's nature to be caring and loving towards his creation. And, as his nature, in terms of his nature is like not wishing for people to suffer without reason and so on. So we can use words like evil to describe these occurrences, not in the sense that that the hurricane was malevolent, but rather in the sense that states of affairs resulting from such occurrences are contrary to God's alleged good nature, right? So that's just the basic case. And then it seems like what you're saying is like, well, God, everything that happens is for God's purpose. It's God serving justice.
Yes. Could I explain
sure.
that a little bit? So there are two main things that really go on within religious sects. And this is what I've noticed. It's either going to be a theocentric system or an anthropocentric system, meaning man is at the center or God is at the center, right? Mm-hmm. So in the Calvinist system, we are not the ones putting ourselves in the center. We acknowledge that everything, this entire exercise of life, all of creation throughout time, the fabric of reality, is for God to demonstrate either, like I said before, I hate to be reductive or repetitive, but his justice or his mercy. It's for him glorifying himself.
Sure.
The anthropocentric, we reject that entirely. It's not about us. While we are important in the whole exercise, we're secondary to it all.
Sure. I would just say that if we're going to give God, if you're the sort of the hypothesis that you're putting forth gives God the substantive property of being all loving and all caring and all good, I think based on the way that we intuitively understand these concepts, it's very hard to. Yeah,
I'm sorry to interject there, but we also acknowledge that he is also just. He also gets angry. He also has something called wrath. So I think a lot of the time you may have come into contact with Christians who give you a watered down gospel, who just says he is nothing but loving. But there is another side to that where he is also nothing but just completely.
Okay, sure. But even on that version, right, if we're going to say that God is just and he's loving and caring, I still don't think that these properties, like if these properties have any meaning to us, right, it would be very surprising for a God who has these properties to create a world where, millions of people die horrible deaths from natural causes and diseases, right? Like, right. So I still think you have this burden to explain, because it seems like prima facie at face value, right? If we have an all-loving God who also created the world, we wouldn't expect a world where millions of innocent people die from natural causes, right?
Well, that's where, if you look further into my system, we don't believe that anybody is innocent. We enter this world under the federal headship of the first Adam, under which we are born under sin. So the biblical term would be that we operate abiding, and this is before someone is saved. We have the wrath of God abiding over us through our life.
Sure. Okay, so I mean, it seems like we're very quickly gonna reach like on this point at least, we're gonna reach just a sort of point of intractable disagreement, because it feels to me like if your justification is like, yes, God is all loving, and it's consistent with an all loving God
that's not my position. My position that
sure,
God,
but all just, right?
well, God is always right. As the creator from which everything in all the fabric of reality, everything was derived, he gets to do with it whatever he wants. See, if we had to say, if we went to the second point of contact on those data points that we talked about, talking about wills, me and you, like I said in my opening statement, have something called a creaturely will. Right, we're constantly we both agreed at the very beginning that there is no such thing as free will for us, because why? There is constant stimuli bombarding and influencing our choices 24/7 of our lifespan. That's just undeniable. No one's going to argue that. So there's something always influencing our choices. God, in like from eternity, when he was the triune God was the only thing in existence that is purely free. He is the one with free will.
Sure. So, I mean, I guess if you're going to say that God is just, but you just are willing to, just bite the bullet and say that it's just to just kill billions of people who, ostensibly have never done anything wrong in their lives just because they were born in sin. It's just to give.
That's the problem. If you look into all of our past, we've all done something wrong, right?
Okay. What about like a baby who dies, who gets like ripped apart by a lion?
Yeah, hold on. Let me jump in here. Because Maldi, you're saying that you would define good and evil based on outcomes, correct?
I thought he didn't believe in evil.
I don't believe in evil, but like
what he is calling good and evil, you would define those based on outcomes.
Well, I would say that like the argument from evil doesn't commit me to saying that bad outcomes exhaust what counts as evil. Like there could be other things that are intrinsically evil for all I care. All I'm saying is like if evil means everything, or if evil means anything and isn't just a tautology that just means whatever God happens to do, then it seems like millions of people dying unjustifiably, experiencing completely needless suffering that doesn't seem to serve any purpose whatsoever.
Well, that's the part, though, is you're defining it based on being justifiable, right? Whereas he's saying if it's God's will, then it is justifiable.
Well,
right?
Okay, but if he's going to take that line, then I just take it that when he says God is good and God does good things, if I say, okay, well, based on how everyone understands the concept of good, there seems to be things we can see in the world which would suggest that God is not good. But then he's just going to say, okay, well, no, but just the fact that God did it means it's good. Well, then I just take it that good it just doesn't mean anything. It just means what God happens to do, right?
Well,
so good is just void of any substance.
Real quick, I have to say, Pedro, you have to go in real quick to Twitch and nuke this VOD right now.
We've just been talking about God.
Yeah, but just do it.
Okay. Sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Give me 1 second. Mouthy, just hold on for a moment. I'm sorry about this. Twitch.
It's an odd intermission, I know.
No worries. Create a dashboard.
I did. Yep.
I saw it. I want to let you know there's people who do it all the time, though.
I know. I get it. I understand.
Video producer. Okay. All right, it's deleted.
Okay, those people probably don't have the same enemies I do. But anyway, go ahead, man.
Okay, so if quickly I could rebound and say what this may come down to is a significant portion of on who God is and how he operates is Isaiah 55 verse 9. His ways are above my ways. And then I have it actually prepared here for a second. Give me one moment. So, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. So you were talking about people getting torn apart by lions, specifically babies, right? Sometimes in this world, things happen that are orchestrated by God specifically, that until we get into eternity with him and have the opportunity to actually ask him what's going on, we won't ever see the grand plan or the ultimate purpose behind it. But that is in where your system fails, because ultimately that baby getting ripped apart does not matter. It was just a purposeless moment that just occurred. It has no basis on to call it, oh, that was a bad event or that was unfortunate. It just happened. Whereas in our system, we're telling you sometimes God takes people out of this world at particular times to save them from suffering that they would have incurred if they had stayed here longer. Like, for example, I know, no, I don't want to do a heart jerk or anything like that, but I had a person in my life got taken away from me recently, and I would be on the phone with them all the time, and they were just saying how much they felt like they were being persecuted, right? And they were a believer, and I know them and I love them, but they were taken out of this world at a particular time ordained by God. And in my eyes, this place is going crazy right now. As you can see, we have people arguing for things like pedophilia. We pretty much are seeing Germany relapse into World War II moments for no reason. I don't know what they're thinking, but this is the ultimate plan of God actually unfolding before your eyes. You're not going to understand everything that's happening, but let you know from the get-go that it has an ultimate purpose behind it.
Okay, so I detected sort of 2 points there. The first point is that under atheism, bad things happen, but they're pointless, right? Like there's no purpose to them.
Yes, we would ask you to just ground. Why would you call something bad? Like what? Because that requires some kind of objective standard, right?
Okay, so I would say no, but okay, so I guess there's 3 points I just want to make really quickly. So okay. The first point is, you said the baby getting ripped apart is pointless, and this counts against atheism. I don't think it really does. It's certainly the case that the fact that on an atheist hypothesis, when a baby gets ripped apart by lions, there is no purpose, and that might feel bad to us, right? That might be like sort of emotionally hard for us to grapple with. But I don't think that the fact that an entailment of atheism is emotionally hard to grapple with actually means that therefore atheism is less likely to be true. If anything, at most, it would just mean that atheism, if true, is less fortunate, right? That's not actually evidence against it. I would also say that what is evidence, though? So what is evidence is when we have a data point that's less expected on one hypothesis than another. So forget about whether or not this data point is easier to deal with emotionally on the hypothesis of atheism, and ask the question, is this data point more expected on the hypothesis of atheism? And I would say that it is more expected on the hypothesis of atheism, which counts in favor of atheism being true, because on the atheist hypothesis, the universe is indifferent. The universe does not care what happens to us. And if we die, so what? Atheism is a hypothesis of indifference. And so it would make a lot of sense for there to be a lot of fucked up shit happening, a lot of messed up things happening in the world, because nobody cares. There's no creator who's ruling over what happens, who wants us to do well. Whereas on the theist hypothesis, there is this God who is supposedly all loving, all just, And given how most people understand these concepts, it's very hard to square the idea that such a God is directing everything that happens with the obvious facts that there's a lot of unjustified or seemingly pointless suffering that occurs in the world. I would say just two other points really quickly. The first point is, you said, well, if you're an atheist, you have to explain how can something be bad. You have to give an objective standard for something being bad. Well, I don't think that's actually true. I'm inclined to say that there is no such thing as objective badness. There is no such thing as objective badness. So that's not really a data point that my hypothesis has to account for. And I don't think that my argument from evil requires that my hypothesis says that there is objective badness. All my argument from evil requires is that your hypothesis says that objective badness exists, right? Like I said, it's just we're saying that on your hypothesis, God has these properties. And so if that were true, not that these properties actually do exist, but if it were true that these properties did exist in a substantive sense and God had them, it would be very surprising that we live in the world that we live in. And the final point is just that you said that evil is sort of justified, or it's less unsurprising. It's less surprising that we see this on the theist hypothesis because there's always a purpose for evil happening, right? So maybe it sucks that somebody suffered a lot and died, but they would have suffered worse if they didn't die at the time that they died. And so really it's justified. But the problem there is that you're assuming that God was bound to two alternative options. He could either kill you or let you suffer more, right? In which case, yeah, okay, then if he killed you, then it would seem consistent with him being all good because he had these two choices and he picked the better one. But of course, God is not restricted to those two choices. God can do anything. He's all powerful. So he could have picked a third world where you didn't die, but also you wouldn't have suffered more had you not died. He could have picked one where you would have been happy for the rest of your life. So I don't think that appeal really explains away the issue.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out really quick, because in your statement there, you said there's no such thing as objective or good, you said? Mm-hmm. Is there anything that is objective?
It depends on what you mean by objective.
Is there any kind of objective, fact-based statement concerning morality that we can make?
Yeah, so concerning morality, I think we can make true. So I think I would say that I'm some form of moral relativist. So I think that we can make true moral statements, but it doesn't make sense to say that these moral statements are true simpliciter. Rather, moral statements can only be their truth value is dependent with reference to some particular system. So if I say murder is wrong, is that statement true? Well, it doesn't make sense to say murder is wrong simpliciter. What does make sense is if I clarify and I say, well, what I mean is that murder is wrong relative to the particular moral system that I personally accept, in which case then it will be the case that it can be true that murder is wrong. So that's kind of like the meta-ethical view that I accept.
Understood. And you would clarify that by stating positively, yes, I think morals are dependent on time, place, and group of people. They're relative.
Well, I just mean that the truth value of a moral statement is going to be relative to some particular system. So like if I say murder is wrong relative to the system that I accept, then the statement murder is wrong is true. If I say murder is wrong, but I mean relative to the moral system which is held by a murderer, then in that case, obviously, murder will not be wrong. Or it would be false to say murder is wrong according to that system.
Okay, so I'll make this statement as if I'm a German in the 1940s. There is a certain people group who I deem lesser than I, and it is worthy of me to kill them. It is a moral, just, good thing that I do. How do you combat that?
Well, I would say that it's this statement, it's okay. So if we're talking about like a certain group of people who we want to kill, the statement, we ought to kill this group of people, is incorrect relative to the standard of morality that I accept and relative to the standard of morality that I think the vast majority of people would be willing to accept on reflection.
Okay. So is that an objective statement you're making now?
I think like it's objectively true that certain things follow from it's objectively true that certain things can be morally good relative to certain moral standards or moral systems. Yeah.
Okay, so there is objective truth in your system.
Hmm?
What establishes those objective truths?
Well, in the case of morality, what the truth maker for a moral statement is going to be the fact that it is in fact the case that it follows from this particular moral system that X is wrong, right?
Who is the ultimate truth maker? My system, it's God.
I don't think that there is a who that's the ultimate truth maker. I think the truth maker is just going to be I think the truth maker is going to depend upon the domain of discourse that we're talking about. But in the case of moral discourse, the truth maker is just like coherence to a particular system. So like a moral statement is true if that statement does indeed follow from the moral system we've specified.
Okay, so it is kind of so I would say then now, domain means time, place, group of people.
Well, wait.
So
when I
that
say
is kind of
domain,
arbitrary. That is arbitrary. You understand that, correct?
well, when I say domain, that's not exactly what I mean by domain. I just mean like because you asked me what's the truth.
Pedro, can you turn your mic up?
Oh yes.
So you asked me like what's the truth maker, right? And when I said domain, all I mean is that like I don't think that so when it comes to like, debates in epistemology, there is debates over the correct theory of truth. So some people will say that truth is a correspondence relation. So a statement is true if that statement corresponds to something that exists in the world.
Can I give you a statement to work with?
Sure.
2 + 2 = 4.
So in the case of 2 + 2 = 4, so this is why I said that it depends on the domain, right? Because there are different domains of discourse. For example, there's the moral domain of discourse, there's the mathematical domain of discourse, there's like a scientific domain of discourse where we're trying to describe things scientifically. And in all of these different domains, I think that the truth maker is going to be a different property.
Pedophilia is wrong.
So that's going to be particular to the moral domain. And in the moral domain, the truth maker of a moral statement is just whether or not that statement coheres to a specified moral system. In
what domain is pedophilia ever right? In mine, it's always wrong.
I'm just, so when I say domain, I'm not talking about different moral systems. I'm just talking about different domains of discourse, like the mathematical domain of discourse versus the scientific domain of discourse versus the moral domain of discourse. So like let me give you an example, right? So if we're asking a scientific question that is going to be analyzed through like the scientific method, like does let's think like does a certain planet exist? Well, the truth maker for that domain, for the scientific domain, is going to be a correspondence relation. In other words, the thing that makes it true in the scientific domain is whether or not the statement corresponds to something in reality. So the statement Pluto exists, the truth maker for that statement is just whether or not that statement corresponds to a fact that there is a thing called Pluto that actually is like physically existing in reality. Whereas in like the mathematical domain, when we say 2 + 2 = 4, I don't think the truth maker is some platonic realm where numbers exist in the same way that Pluto exists. I just think the truth maker is that we have this concept of mathematics that abides by certain rules, and certain mathematical statements do and don't cohere with the established rules of mathematics. And then so for the moral domain, I'm just saying that the truth maker is just a moral statement is true. It can only be true relative to a particular system. And then the truth maker is just going to be whether or not that moral claim does in fact cohere with that specified moral system. or follow from that system.
You said established rules of mathematics, right?
Mm-hmm.
What established that? Who, what, how?
Well, I mean, at a certain point, if you ask me why does 2 + 2 = 4, I'm just going to kind of throw my hands up and say, well, look, I mean, that's just what I take 2 and plus and 4 to mean, right? Like we just all we can all just grasp like the internal rules of mathematics. Now, if you're asking me to give an account of why we happen to have access to this domain of discourse, I guess I would probably appeal to some sort of an evolutionary account. Like we developed the ability to understand mathematical concepts because for some reason being able to understand mathematical concepts and engage in mathematical reasoning just happened to be evolutionarily advantageous.
What is the starting point for evolution? What's the origin point?
I don't know what that means.
Well, so sir, right, we have a fabric of reality that we operate in, right?
Yeah.
We can agree on that.
Mm-hmm.
We are ultimately getting down to the part where we ask what produces that fabric of reality: time, space, and matter. What's happening here, and I'm trying to be very soft with it, because I don't never want to be the instrument that separates somebody or pushes somebody farther away from God. But when it comes to the question of how do I actually get the factual basis of what establishes 2 + 2 = 4, when we take your system, utilitarianism, all the way back to its zenith point, it stops and it can't give an answer. It does not know. Whereas I can tap into what I would call the metaphysical, the triune God, and say, this is where it all comes from. Both systems, I'll admit, are, I've said this before, both systems are totally circular, right? One says we come from nothing and we're going back to nothing due to the rate of decay. The other system says we come from God, and by his decree being fulfilled throughout all time, we're going back to God, ultimately circular around him. One can only map onto reality. The other does not.
Yeah, so it seems like, basically your objection is you were just saying like, well, why? So you asked like, where does math come from, or why do we have the ability to, talk about math? And I appealed to evolution. And then you said, okay, well, if we keep running that back far enough, I'm just going to ask you, okay, well, what started everything? Why does anything exist? And you have an explanation for that, whereas I don't have an explanation for that. What I would just say is like, I think there's multiple plausible explanations. One is just that the universe is, so if you're asking for an explanation for why the universe emerged, I don't know that I need to give one. I could just say that the universe, that things exist, and that's just necessary. That's just a brute fact that has no deeper explanation. Things just exist, right? And there's no account to be given. And then I would just, and then you might say, well, that's explanatorily unsatisfactory because you're just saying it's necessary without giving a deeper explanation. To which I would say, okay, well, what's your explanation for why God exists? Because it seems like the only answer you can give to that is the same argument that I gave as to why the universe exists, which is just that it's necessary. God is necessary, and there's no deeper account to be given. So if you can say that for God, then I don't know why I can't say that for the universe.
All right, that's completely fair. Ultimately, we are going to get to the point where I say there is no starting point for God. God is eternal, everlasting, and in the metaphysical place where he embodies fully, which is eternity, there just is no starting point for him. I would just say that I would be able to give a more reasonable answer of that's where we come from, because what it also comes up to ultimately is that you say we come from nothing, and I say we do come from something, more specifically someone.
Yeah, so what I would just say the following, right? So what I would say is that like, it seems like the argument you're making is just like, look, I can give an account of why things exist. I can give an account of existence, whereas the atheist can't. The atheist just has to say we came from nothing. And so your hypothesis, I guess, gives an explanation, whereas my hypothesis doesn't give an explanation. what I would just say is like, so I guess to see what's potentially problematic with this, right? Compare the following argument for the claim that the Earth.
Can I interject for just a second? Yeah, I don't mean to. Sure. You kind of said something false. I'm honestly not just here to prove you wrong. I'm more so here to, I don't know, if you knew our theology more succinctly, you would know that I don't know who are God's elect people, and you are an image bearer of God, and I'm just commanded to share the gospel with you. Sure. So if I said ultimately what I'm here for and trying to do is tell you, brother, this doesn't make any sense, just jump onto the boat, that one's sinking.
Right. So what I would just say is that, like, with respect to the appeal that the theist can give an explanation for why things exist, whereas the atheist can't, I would just say that, like, look, so compare the following argument for the claim that the Earth rests on the back of a giant elephant, right? So you who do not believe in the elephant have no explanation of why the Earth does not fall, given that it is hanging in empty space, right? I, on the other hand, explain this by appealing to the elephant, which keeps the Earth from falling. So on the point of the Earth's not falling, we believers in the elephant are ahead of you who do not believe in the elephant, right? Because you can't give an explanation for why the Earth doesn't fall. I can, because I'm appealing to the elephant.
But I can.
But the obvious, wait, really quickly. So the obvious point to make about belief in the elephant is that the elephant hypothesis suffers from exactly the same alleged deficit as the hypothesis of the unsupported Earth. If the Earth does require something to stop it from falling, then the elephant will be equally in need of something to stop it from falling. So clearly, the postulation of the elephant does not bring with it any explanatory advantage, right? And so the point here is that a similar point applies to the explanation of the existence of the universe, right? Whatever range of options is open to the theist to explain the existence of God, exactly the same range of options is open to the naturalist to explain the existence of the universe, right? So if the theist just says that God exists out of necessity, then the naturalist can say that the universe exists out of necessity, right? If the naturalist, if it is open to say that, to the theist to say that God's existence involves an infinite regress, then it is open to the naturalist to say that the existence of the universe involves an infinite regress. If it's open to the theist to say that the existence of God has no explanation, then it's open to the naturalist to say that the existence of the universe has no explanation, right? So the point here is just that insofar as we are interested in explaining the existence of the universe, the postulation of a God who creates the universe doesn't seem to bring with it any sort of explanatory advantage, right? So that's my point.
Okay. This is fun. Let's try and battle the elephant thing, right? Okay. What if me and you both, since I think you agree with the established laws of physics, correct?
I think so, yeah.
Perfect, me too. So we don't have to battle the elephant guy. We can just say, no, the sun, due to its gravitational pull and the position of all the other things in the universe, perfectly to a number. I don't know if you've ever watched those people at NASA put the equations together, but to a T, all these things matter, and putting in the physics, that is what holds the Earth in its proper spin. That's what makes us not too close or too far away from the sun. That's why the moon is where it is, and why we can have a nice working calendar or a clock. This is that, and then ultimately we would just, for us theists and the naturalists, we would then say, okay, so the guy with the elephant's crazy, but now we can look at each other and say, well, let's try and explain where these established laws of physics come from, and then you would say nothing, and then I would say something.
So okay. I think I do want to clear this up real quick. I think that he's saying that because you have an explanation for why the Earth isn't falling, that doesn't mean that you are right because you have an explanation. Whereas he cannot have an explanation, and still his line of reasoning could be correct behind it, even though he doesn't know all of the reasons for why it's not falling. His line of reasoning behind it could still be correct in the end.
Well, so the point about the elephants is just to say the point about the point about the elephants is just to say, like, look, The argument you're making is that the theist can give an explanation for the existence of the universe. The atheist cannot give an explanation for the existence of the universe. And therefore, the theist hypothesis has more explanatory depth than the atheist hypothesis, because we have this data point and the theist can explain it. The atheist has no explanation, and generally we should favor theories that can explain more things. But what I'm saying is that I don't actually think that the theist explanation does add explanatory depth, because you can say, well, I can explain the universe by saying God created it. And then I say, okay, well, how do you explain the existence of God? And then anything you can say to explain the existence of God, whether you just say it's necessary or it needs no explanation, it's just eternal, any of the explanations that you can give for the existence of God, I can equally give for the existence of the universe. And so it doesn't actually seem like your hypothesis provides a better or a deeper explanation at all compared to my hypothesis. And I think that a similar thing applies to the existence of the laws of physics, right? Because you say, I can give an explanation for the laws of physics, whereas the atheist can't. Whereas what I would say, I would just say, like, look, I'm at the end of the day, I'm going to acknowledge, like, yeah, it's weird, it's bizarre, but I'm just going to explain the laws of physics by saying that they're necessary. Or maybe I can just say that they're a brute contingency. Like maybe it's a contingent fact that the laws of physics are as they are, but that's just how things turned out, and there's no deeper explanation to give, right? And then so you're going to say, but that's unsatisfactory, and I have a better explanation because I can appeal to God. But then I'm going to say, okay, well, so if your explanation is that God made the laws of physics what they are, clearly he could have done otherwise, right? God is all powerful. He could have done anything. He could have made the laws of physics different from the way that they are. So why did God create the laws of physics as they are rather than creating different laws of physics or a universe with different laws of physics? And then it seems like your explanation for that, for why God created this one as opposed to a different universe with different laws, is just going to be you're just going to have to say the same thing that I do, which is just you're just going to have to say, oh well, it's just a brute necessity that has no deeper explanation. And so I don't actually think that your hypothesis does give a deeper explanation. It just kicks the can down the road, because whatever thing you can, because your explanation for why God chose to make the universe with the laws of physics that exist now is going to be equally as unsatisfactory as my explanation for why the laws of physics are what they are. Because in both cases, we're just going to have to appeal to like a brute necessity or a brute contingency, or something like that.
Could the problem be? I think I figured it out. So I'm just gonna, not to insult you, but I'm gonna call the cosmos, which you think is, your God pretty much. The cosmos just is, and then I'll say the triune God. One of those has a medium through which to communicate with me, and the other doesn't. Do you know what that medium is?
Divine revelation?
Yes, the Bible. Correct.
Yeah, so but I don't know, like, I don't know why I would.
Well, for you, I would do this. Mm-hmm. I would treat it first as a historical document. Not that I believe this. I take it from a theological point first, but mm-hmm. I would take it from a historical perspective first and ask this one question: did Jesus actually walk the earth? Do you believe he walked the earth?
I'm agnostic. I haven't done a lot of research on that.
Okay. Well, if you look at documentation, even outside of Christian primary sources, they all acknowledge that, yes, Jesus was here on earth. Mm-hmm. That happened. So I have a medium and I have an event where my God, having the truth of the Bible, gives me a full explanation that grounds everything that I know.
So this might be a good time to slip this super chat in, just to help move the conversation along. This one's from Jack in the Hat. Pedro, how do you account for the planets and stars outside of our solar system? The size of the universe is beyond comprehension, and yet God's focus is entirely on our little planet. Seems pretty wasteful.
Well, his focus isn't entirely on us. That's where I'm not anthropocentric in my theology, meaning I'm not man-centered. I'm God-centered in my theology. So it's all about him. In terms of the rest of the cosmos, I would reference Ephesians 11, Ephesians 11:1 or 1:11. I forget. I'm going to be honest. I forget. No, it's 11:1. No. It's 1:11. Yahweh does as he pleases. He works everything out after the counsel of his will. So he's doing whatever he wants with the universe. And like I said, there's a grand plan behind this that until we are face to face with him and able to actually converse with him, that we'll just never be able to grasp because his ways are above our ways. It's like, Mouthy, have you ever seen Daredevil? Did you watch it?
I haven't. I'm sorry.
Gosh.
You should have told me beforehand. I would have prepared.
Okay, I should have. So there's this moment in the show that was so awesome, and I thought it was a perfect analogy. Have you ever looked at art?
Have I ever looked at art? Yes.
Yeah, like been to a real art gallery?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So have you ever walked behind a painting and seen a tapestry and you saw all its knots and like its clumps of paint from where the painter obviously didn't care about the backside? And then on the front, it's this beautiful picture.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty much like this. The backside, where we see all these knots and threads that are ragged happening, that's the human perspective from which all this is going on. And then only on God's divine perspective, from where he stands, making this whole thing happen, can he actually see the full picture and why it all comes together. That was a non sequitur, kind of, yeah.
Do you guys want to, so this was mostly about good and evil. Did you guys want to move on to utilitarianism or free will? There's about 45 minutes left.
Sure. I just want to ask like one quick question. So I guess I'm a little bit confused on the most recent argument that Pedro made. We can move on from this because I know we didn't want to stick on this the whole time. I'm just like a little confused because I feel like
How about you guys make closing statements on this section and then we'll move on?
Yeah, yes, that's fine. I just want like a little bit of clarification before that on the point that Pedro makes, because so it seems like your argument is that the Jesus of the Bible existed, and I'm perfectly willing to grant that, but I don't think that the existence of the Jesus of the Bible implies the truth of the rest of the Bible, right? So I guess like, and I don't understand how the idea that the Jesus of the Bible exists means that theism gives a better explanation of the data that you were appealing to than atheism. At most, I guess it would just mean that, sure, we have equally bad, equally unsatisfactory explanations for things like the existence of the universe or the reason for the laws of physics, because we both, at the end of the day, can't really give an explanation. We're just going to both have to say it's necessary. But you're saying that there's this independent piece of evidence for theism that seems sort of unrelated from those things, which is that Jesus exists. And I'm perfectly willing to grant that Jesus exists, but I don't really think that's evidence for the truth of theism. That's just truth for that's just evidence for the claim that there was a historical figure named Jesus, not that he was the Son of God or anything.
Well, I would close with this. So far, what's been happening is one side, I think, has been able to go farther back and prove an answer, right? And I have said this time and time again, the circles are there. It's undeniable. What's going to need to be found out or explained is which one actually maps onto reality itself. So far, I'm hearing a lot from Mouthy's side where I just have to accept, I have to give a lot of concessions, and I have to pretty much, in order for him to be able to argue, hand him a lot of things, which I'm very and highly uncomfortable doing, because if I do that, then we get led into purposeless evil very easily. Whereas my system does ground all this, does give everyone out there listening a purpose, meaning a reason for their life. And if what I am saying is true, creates a very big, I would say, point of contact for everyone listening right now that they need to think about. If this is the triune God, if this triune God of the Bible is real, and he did enter into creation and die for me, and there is a way for me to actually reconcile my way for him, what is the thing stopping me? In this next part of our conversation, if we're going to be going over free will, I think we will determine that is it in fact, yes, it is the nature of man.
Okay, so I guess my closing would just be, so you said that theism is more virtuous because the explanation goes further back, because, I can't really explain things like the existence of the universe or, why the laws of physics are what they are, whereas you can. But this was sort of the point of the elephant analogy, right? Because like if we have two competing hypotheses for why the earth doesn't fall, and my hypothesis is, well, it just doesn't. I just don't really have an explanation for that. And then your hypothesis, and then you could say a similar thing. You could say, well, my explanation is that there's an elephant, so my explanation goes deeper than yours. But the problem is that it really doesn't, because I can just ask, okay, well, why is it the case that the elephant doesn't fall? And then you're just going to have to say the same exact thing that I said about why the earth doesn't fall, which is just, oh, I just can't give an explanation. It's just the case that the elephant doesn't fall. So it doesn't seem like that's actually a better explanation. And similarly, if you're saying, why does the universe exist? Why are the laws of physics as they are? I'm just going to say, I don't have an explanation. It's just the case. There's no deeper explanation to be given. It's just a brute fact. But then and then you're going to say, okay, well, I have a better explanation because I can explain it through God. But then I'm going to say, okay, well, with respect to existence, why does God exist? And with respect to the laws of physics, why did God choose for the laws of physics to be as they are? And in both cases, you're just going to have to say the same exact thing that I did, which is just say, oh, I don't really have an explanation. God just chose the way that he chose, and I don't have an explanation for that. God just exists, and I don't have an explanation for that. And my problem is, if you can say that about God, why can't I say that about the universe? And in fact, it would make more sense to just say that about the universe, and then rather than adding God and then saying the same thing about God that we could say about the universe. Because if we're only saying it about the universe, then we have a weaker ontology. We're positing the existence of less fundamental entities. Whereas if you add God into the equation, you haven't given us a better explanation, but you have inflated our ontology so that we now have a less simple theory. And as we know, all else being equal, we should always prefer simpler theories or more parsimonious theories, because theories that posit the existence of less entities have less ways in which they can be false. And then the other point was just that you mentioned that theism gives people a purpose for their life. But again, I don't really think that's evidence in favor of theism, right? Because it might be the case that it would feel nicer if we had a purpose for their lives. But I would just say that the fact that one hypothesis feels nicer than another doesn't actually provide evidence that it's more likely to be true. It just provides evidence that it would be more fortunate, which is an interesting debate to have, but I don't think it's, I guess, relevant to this subject. So I guess that's my closing. Yeah.
This just passed through, and it's kind of funny, right? I had to read it a couple times to figure it out, but the Earth orbits the Sun at 666 or 66,600 miles per hour. The Earth circumference equals 600 times 6 times 6 nautical miles. Distance to the Moon is 6 times 60 times 666 miles. It's just a whole bunch of 666 references. So thanks for that, David. We appreciate it for $5.
Okay, did you guys want to move on to utilitarianism or free will? Because we probably only have time for one more.
Okay. I would just ask this of utilitarianism, right? You want to say that I am saying, to wrap up both our hypotheses, I'm saying a brute fact and you're saying a brute fact, correct? We're just saying both brute fact. Okay.
Right.
Is it fair to ask which brute fact then makes more sense? Because remember, your brute fact is we just are. My brute fact is God just is.
Right. And so, so my point is just that those two things Right, so if I can say if you can say God just is without giving an explanation, my question is, why can't we just say we just are without giving an explanation, right? Because we seem to be on even footing there. The only difference is you're positing a more complicated ontology, which is, of course, violates the theoretical virtue of parsimony, because you're positing more than I am. Because I'm just positing a universe, you're positing a universe plus a God. So I would just make the argument that your theory is equally bad at explaining the data that we're trying to explain, but is needlessly more complex, which counts against it being true. Now, it is fair to say, as you asked, which brute fact
Makes more
more
sense.
sense.
Yeah.
And that's fair, but that's going to be settled by just other considerations. And so which hypothesis makes more sense can't be established by appealing to who can explain the existence of the universe better. It's just going to have to be settled by different pieces of evidence, which so yeah, we could if you think you have some other independent pieces of evidence which should lead us to favoring God, then of course I would agree that we should posit God as the brute fact that explains existence rather than the universe. But I guess I would just need to see that evidence.
So
I mean, to make it more succinct,
let's make it more succinct here. You don't need a why.
I'm sorry, Pedro. I had to mute you. The
No.
moderator was trying to jump in. Go
I do
ahead.
just want to real quick. Both of you have presuppositions that neither one of you can explain. Just one person has more rationale and the other person has less rationale. But in the end, neither one of you can explain your presuppositions or axioms. But you're going to be working off of a system with those presuppositions and axioms, which justifies all of your rationale afterwards.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That is the point. The point that I've been making. Yeah.
Well, my presuppositions have been able to be very succinctly explained, whereas his presuppositions just say this is just a brute force fact. I have a why. He does not have a why.
But my point is that you don't have a why. You have a why for why the universe exists.
No. I'm asking why do we go through pain?
Oh, sure.
Remember my opening statement.
Mm-hmm.
What was the reason for my pain?
The reason for your pain is that God finds it just.
No. The reason for my pain, the personal, if you understood our system, the pain that I go through is like a fire that is taking, like, have you ever done any kind of like material refining or anything like that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so I did something cool in a science class once where there was this gold encrusted with all this gunk on it. And with a blowtorch, pretty much, I was able to burn away all the imperfections, and in my hand, I had pure gold. Now, the person who brought that stuff in that day took away the gold. I was pretty mad, but the point of the whole thing is, imagine the fire is the pain you're going through, and the gunk is all the imperfections in your life being burned away. And then at the end, just like Job 23, actually, can't believe that came up, you come forth as gold. Your pain has a reason. Whereas in your system, I'm just going through, I'm just here, and it's just hurting, and it's not going to stop until my life's over. It just is.
So about 10 minutes ago, we talked about moving on to free will.
Okay, yeah.
If you guys want to stay on this.
Whoa, he doesn't believe in free will. Well, we both don't agree there's any such thing as free will.
Right.
Right?
So yeah. So
I
guess
that's kind of
yeah. Well, okay, but there is, I guess I would push you on that in one respect. Well, not push you, because I don't understand, like, I don't really understand your theological views because I'm not, like, a Calvinist or whatever. So
but you can become one, but you can step over at any time. The line's right there, brother. We this is open invitation.
We'll see. Maybe you can convince me, but I would just say that, with respect to the fact that you can explain why suffering is justified. So I would just reject that this is a data point such that, so you're saying we have this data point, which is that suffering is justified, right? Or suffering has a purpose. and theism can explain why suffering has a purpose, but atheism can't explain why suffering has a purpose. But I would just reject that that's a data point that needs to be explained, because I don't think suffering has a purpose. And so because I don't think that this purpose exists, I don't think that it's a virtue of theism over atheism that theism can give an account of this purpose, whereas atheism can't.
Well, let's ask this easy question right here. In all of the span of human existence, has there ever been a moment throughout any time there was not suffering?
No.
Thank you. Therefore, we got to deal with it, right?
100. Well, we can try. we should try.
Yeah, we can try. Now, my system, like I said in my opening statement, none of that suffering is purposeless. None of it doesn't have a why. None of it doesn't have an ultimate goal. Your system doesn't. It's just happening.
Right. But so I guess my point is just that there are two things you could mean by that, right? On the one hand, you could be saying, we have this data point that it is a fact that our suffering has a purpose. And because theism can give an explanation for that fact, whereas atheism can't give an explanation for that fact, that favors theism over atheism. But what I would just say is that seems to be a question-begging argument, because I would just deny that this is a fact that is in need of explanation. And in fact, I would only see a reason to believe that this is a fact if we assume at the outset that that your religious views are true. But if we need to assume that your religious views are true in order to assume that this argument works in favor of theism, then the argument isn't really going to do anything to convince me, because I don't grant that assumption, right? That's the assumption that we are having a dispute over right now. On the other hand, if you mean that it is a data point that we want there to be a purpose for our suffering, and theism gives an account of that, but atheism doesn't, then I could agree to that. I just don't think that the fact that one view is more in line with what we want to be true, I don't think that actually counts in favor of that view being true, like as a factual matter.
Okay, so do you not want there to be a purpose for suffering?
Let's
talk about what do you want, because we should be getting into will. This is my will for you. My will is that you've been through this conversation, I've determined that you are suffering talking to me because I am an insufferable person, and I want there to be purpose behind that, Mouthy.
Yeah.
And the purpose, what I want behind this whole thing, is for you to be, by the grace of God, given a new nature and redeemed and come to a spiritual life and actually, reconcile with God. And then I can call you a brother in Christ, and we can go through the internet debating people and kicking them over the rail. That's what I want. That's that's my ultimate purpose. What do you want? Or
well, I mean, I of course I want. So when it comes to, do I want there to be a purpose? Thank you, Zen. When it comes to whether or not I want there to be a purpose for suffering, I don't actually know. In fact, I can't even make sense of the idea that there's a purpose for suffering, because whatever purpose you can give for suffering, whether it be, some people will say, oh, well, suffering is necessary because it helps us see the good things in life, or suffering is necessary because it, helps us appreciate well-being more. I don't buy those explanations, right? Because then I'm just going to say, okay, well, it could be the case that suffering wasn't necessary to appreciate the good things in life. So why can't I? So I'm still going to complain that we live in a world where it is necessary, right? And so I almost can't even make sense of the idea of suffering being necessary. In some sense, maybe I'm just too pessimistic, but no matter what scenario you give me, I'm still going to find something to complain about. But
I sense that. I mean, we answered the question earlier. It's not a matter of, is suffering here or not. We agree it's here. It's been here this whole time. It's like how I suffer every time Andrew lights a cigarette, even though he freaking knows that it's going to bring him closer to death. I don't know why.
No, that's stress, bro.
It's
That's stress. Stress brings me cigarettes bring me everlasting life.
There will be tobacco in heaven probably for this one. But okay. Back on track.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have a purpose for suffering, Mouthy, and we still have to deal with suffering, and you are just going to be going around telling people your suffering means nothing in the end, and I'm telling their suffering does mean something in the end, I'm not trying to make it an emotional appeal, but doesn't that seem more caring on my end than yours?
Well, I agree that your your theory of how things are feels better. Like I would, it would be cool if it were the case that I were going to heaven and that suffering had a purpose. But I would say two things. I would just say that, the first thing is I'm just going to say like, yeah, I agree, but life is cruel. The second thing that I would say is, or reality is cruel, but and I don't think,
Hang on, guys. I'm sorry to cut you off. Michael Witkoff, Brother Augustine came in. He had. I've been expecting some call-ins for this show. He had a bunch of questions for you guys. Go ahead, Michael. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead.
How you doing,
Okay,
sir?
I only got a few minutes.
Oh, okay.
I'm doing well. How you doing?
I'm good, man.
Good. So I haven't been listening to the whole thing. I just want to go right to the point because I only have a couple minutes here. So this mouthy infidel guy, what is the foundation, if you can put it succinctly, of the argument you're making, or what is the question that you have for Christians?
I don't know. I think, I don't really think I have I mean, I have multiple offensive arguments I could make. I could appeal to things like the problem of evil or the problem of divine hiddenness. But I guess like or I could just appeal to something like parsimony and just say, look, I think the theist hypothesis posits a more complicated ontology, but doesn't really explain anything that I can't explain on an atheist hypothesis, and therefore we have most reason to accept the atheist hypothesis. But and I think that's probably the most fundamental argument I would go with. But I mean, for the most part, throughout this debate, I've just been on the defensive, which is just to say that Pedro has been making arguments like, look, it seems like theism can explain this data point and atheism can't. And I've basically just been saying, well, no, when you actually break it down, it seems like the atheist explanation and the theist explanation for the data that you're appealing to are equally satisfactory, or I guess more succinctly or more appropriately, equally unsatisfactory. So yeah, I mean, I guess that's all I'd say.
So let's just do one of those. Why don't you tell me your understanding of the problem of evil, and then I will give you the orthodox response.
So my understanding of the problem of evil is that we have two competing hypotheses. On the atheist hypothesis, we can accept something that Paul Draper, for example, calls the hypothesis of indifference, which is just that we live in a universe. There's nobody who's controlling what happens, and the universe is fundamentally just unconscious matter that's indifferent to the flourishing or suffering of the people living within it. And on the other hypothesis, which is the theist hypothesis, we have the idea that there is an all-loving, all-powerful God who wants us to flourish, and so on. And so then we ask the question, okay, we have a data point. So we have two hypotheses, and then we have a data point. And the data point is that there seems to be a very large amount of needless suffering in the world, whether that be, natural diseases or natural disasters or people committing atrocities against one another. And so then the question is, which hypothesis predicts that data more? And I would argue that it seems most intuitive that the data of needless suffering would be more expected on a hypothesis of indifference than it would be expected on the hypothesis that there's an all-loving God who wants us to be happy, who's controlling everything that happens.
Okay, so there's 2 points that need to be made here. The first one is, you said that God wants us to flourish and wants us to be happy. So my first question is, where do you see anything about God wanting us to be happy in the here and now? And what do you mean by flourish?
Sure. So I guess I don't even need to appeal to the idea that God wants us to be happy or flourish. I could just appeal to the fact that on the theist hypothesis, God is said to be all good and all just, right? And
Right,
based on
right.
how we understand those concepts, they seem to be inconsistent. Like when I think of the concept of what a just person is or what a good person is, and then I imagine what kind of world that person would create, it wouldn't be this one, right? It wouldn't be one with massive amounts of needless suffering.
So, okay, so the first thing is that you're saying unless God would do things exactly like you would, then he must not be real. Is that right? That's just
not
solipsism. That's just putting
no.
yourself as God.
That's not what I'm saying. The point isn't what I would do. The point is what somebody who meets the criteria for what we understand to be good would do. Now, if you're going to say like, well, our understanding of good is irrelevant, then okay, I mean, you can go that route. But then I just take it that when you say God is good, if the concept of good doesn't have any external substance besides just what God does, then the statement God is good is just a tautology. It doesn't mean anything. It just means God does what God will do.
Well, again, I have a couple points to make, but you keep saying good as far as we understand, but we doesn't mean anything because there's someone living in filth, living in degeneracy that has a very limited level of understanding, if any at all, compared to someone who has undergone the path of asceticism, died to his own will, overcome the passions and vices, and has therefore restored in himself the image of likeness in God, restored a direct relationship to God, and through that way has come to understand, at least through some kind of an experience, as well as through being illuminated by the overcoming of the passions, is going to have a very different understanding than someone who's not even at the beginning of the path yet. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be rude when I ask this, but are you living in a sinful way, sinful life?
Well, by your criteria, I 100% am. But I would I just want to know, like,
okay,
when you say, but when you say like, oh, well, what does we mean? It just seems like you're obfuscating, because I'm just going to ask you, does the concept of good have any substance that is apart from just what God happens to do?
So you're trying to create your own idea of good, but it's interesting because I'm going to get back to your other point in a second, because the first thing you're doing is that you're kind of aping the idea of good from Christian morality, and then saying that according to our standard that you don't even believe, you don't see how the world we live in could possibly match up to it. But I need to get back to a different point first of all.
But that's sound, right? Because if I say
makes an enormous difference,
right? But
no, it's not. Hold on.
No. So you're fundamentally misunderstanding your argument.
No, I'm not misunderstanding your argument. You're not letting me talk, though. Make my point. The part that you're not going to want to hear is that I'm trying to go one
point at a time, but okay.
You see, are you going to let me talk?
I'm not really interested in being lectured about my sinful lifestyle, right? You just made a point. I'm trying to respond, right?
Right.
I mean, if you want to make another point.
Exactly. Hold on. This is exactly the point, though. Is that people, and I'm not trying to be offensive or insulting, but people like you approach these arguments or these issues, if you will, from a place of pretending to be going about it logically. But the truth about atheists or utilitarians or materialists or whatever, in my experience, is that you're actually arguing from an emotion, specifically the emotion of, I want to do what I want to do. And if someone disagrees with that, they're wrong. I don't want to give up what I'm doing, so I'm going to go after them and attack them. So the fact that you're living in this way is actually the most important part of this argument, because it's not a logical argument.
Okay, so...
And there's a reason the church fathers and the saints throughout time. Hold on.
So,
are you going to let me talk?
Go ahead and finish, Michael.
You've literally been talking for like the past 5 minutes, but okay, continue.
I haven't. So there's a reason, if you look through the writings of all the holiest people throughout time, very first step to understanding and to wisdom. And the reason is, somebody living a filthy life with their body is not going to have their soul or their mind pure enough to understand something good and holy and pure, because we can't separate our body from our mind and from our soul. We are one coherent unit. So when you say, I don't understand how there could be a good God given what we see, it's not how I would do things. The reason you can't is goodness, because you can't see it. You're like looking through a muddy window, essentially, and saying, I can't see any light, so it must not be there. It's not that the light isn't there. It's that the window you're looking through is covered in mud. So all the saints said purification is the very first step. So
Can anyone else hear him?
Yeah, you're breaking up bad, sir.
Yeah, you're breaking up, Michael.
At some point, we do need to allow Mouthy to respond as well, though.
Yeah, he's only got a couple
lot of
minutes. You're
points
breaking
there.
up really bad, Michael. We can't hear you very well.
Okay. I mean, my internet's really bad here, as I was trying to.
Okay. Well, we appreciate the call in, man. I wish we'd give you more time, but we're having a hard time hearing you.
Okay, no problem. The internet's bad here.
Okay, no worries, man. Have a good night.
Okay.
All right, bye.
All right.
So, Mouthy, do you want to
can
respond,
I
or do
just-
you want to go back to Pedro?
Yeah, so if I could just respond to that really quickly. I mean, I already did respond to that argument earlier in this debate, which is just to say, it seems like this guy's argument is to say, in order for the argument from evil to be sound, it must appeal to an antecedently established source of objective morality. But under atheism, there can be no source of objective morality. So therefore, the argument from evil is unsound because we're, as he put it, we're aping Christian morality. So the problem of evil is self-undermining, because in order for it to work, we have to assume the existence of evil, which only exists if God exists, or something like that. But that's just a fundamental misunderstanding of the argument, right? The argument from evil is a form of reductio ad absurdum, which just means that we are assuming the truth of the conclusion that we wish to critique, and then demonstrating that this leads to absurd results, right? And then on the basis of these absurd consequences, it is therefore reasoned that the contention in question is unlikely to be true. So in the case of the problem of evil, all that's needed is a recognition that certain states of affairs prevail in the world that possess properties contrary to the purported nature of God. I don't have to assume that these properties actually exist on my worldview, right? All I have to do is assume that they exist on your worldview, and the data that we observe is contrary to what that worldview would predict, that establishes or that posits the existence of these properties and then attributes them to God.
Okay.
So can I
Pedro? Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. So in that exchange I was hearing during the caller was on, you want to know why arbitrarily evil does not exist, correct?
I don't know what you mean by that.
So if I could tap into this right here, if you just look on the screen, there's a scripture passage here with any kind of different versions, because I want it to be, as unbiased as possible to the Orthodox that come to this channel. But there are certain people in this world God has fashioned as a vessel for his wrath, and then there are other people he has fashioned as a vessel for his mercy, right? Romans. What's happening right now, I would say, is those vessels are meant for demonstrating either his justice or his grace. So it's not purposeless. It's not, there is a why, right? There's a reason to these things. And I think the differentiating factor between me and the caller is that I wouldn't be throwing your sin at you, right? I would more so be pleading. I wouldn't do that. I would be pleading with you that this system that you are adopting makes no sense and is actually a suppression of what you know to be true. Because when I explain this, I am giving a why, a purpose, a meaning, right? And the reason why concerning your will, you may not want to accept this truth is because there needs to be a certain point of regeneration of the active hand of God in your life, which I have no control over. So I'm not going to, go on that point. I'm only here, right, trying to give you questions that you should be pondering and answer questions that internally, if you examine my theological system, make sense.
Okay. Yeah. So
So that's why this is not an over the rail moment. This is you said something faithfully in the beginning of this. You don't really know what's going on here, right? You're very new to us Calvinists, us reformed theology. Really is what you want to call my sector, and it's very new. And I get it. We're a minority, but this is what we would say is the truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I mean, I guess what I would say also, just to be clear, I'm not really upset about, my sin being appealed to. I'm just I was just, hoping to.
No, I sin still too, dude. So
yeah, no, I was just hoping for, for his answers to hurry up so that I could respond, because I felt like he's rambling a little bit. But anyways, so my, I mean, I guess my response to what you just said is like, again, I get it, right? Like, well, firstly, so I guess, so what I've said before is that I agree that you can explain, even if I agreed that you can explain why suffering is not purposeless, I don't know why I would accept the premise that the purposefulness of suffering is a real data point that needs to be explained, because I would just say that, like, yeah, suffering is purposeless and it sucks, but I don't see a reason why that would be a data point that has to be explained, because I just don't think it's even true. But I would also just say that I also reject sort of the idea that the theist really can give a good explanation of why suffering is purposeful, right? Because like I mean, at least I haven't heard one yet, right? Because all you've appealed to, the one example you gave earlier was like, well, God had to kill you because otherwise you would have been you would have had to live and you would have suffered more. But clearly God wasn't constrained to those two options. God could do anything. He could have said, no, I'm picking a third option where you don't get killed, but also you don't have to suffer if you keep living, but rather I'm just going to give you a happy life, right? So I don't know why God would be constrained to those two options as an all-powerful being.
If I had to say God isn't constrained to anything, his will is completely free, it's more so in the immutable characteristics of his nature, where he says, I will fulfill my promises that I have made. And in that decree, remember I talked about a sovereign decree, that holds all knowledge of the beginning and the end of time. It gives shape and form to all reality. There is no moment where my God is going, oops, I didn't see that coming, or he stands outside of it like, a deist would say, like, ooh, that's cool. I wonder what I should do now. None of that's ever happening. Everything is happening in the manner in which he, from the beginning, or actually from eternity past, planned it out to be.
Yeah, so I mean, I totally accept that would be the explanation that you would give. But I would just say, like, I don't know, like, if the appeal you're making is that theism gives like a more comforting explanation, because on theism we can say that suffering is purposeful, on atheism we can't. But the idea that like I'm gonna say the idea that I'm just going to say, like, okay, well, why is it the case that I'm suffering badly? And then you're going to say, well, God just had it happen. And then I say, well, why did God have it happen? Why was that necessary? And it seems like you can't really give an explanation for that. You're just going to say, well, God just happened to give you cancer or something. That doesn't really seem comforting to me.
Well, the comforting part is, I would say the more comforting part about this is, a sovereign God, creator of everything that has ever existed, made you mouthy, right? And everything you're going through, he has made for the purpose of either, one, you knowing his son, Jesus Christ, or two, you being a vessel to which he will demonstrate his justice upon. The part where he is exercising grace and mercy in patience for you is that he has not brought you to that final moment of judgment yet. And actually he is ordained this moment where me and you are talking, and he wants me to tell you that in the truth of his gospel and his word, and according to the crucifixion of Christ, if you were to accept his son, he would adopt you wholesale. But that all is dependent upon the moment of where God actually reaches down in your heart, which I pray for all the time, all of you out there who don't, follow Christ, to actually restore you to spiritual life. That is the comforting part. I have a sovereign God that is completely in control, and there is no dice roll going on at any moment in my life. Everything has meaning. There is a purpose.
Okay. Okay, I mean, yeah, sure. So if you're just saying like,
kind of needed a conversation, I know. That's kind of like a
yeah, I
kind
mean,
of
yeah, I mean, I guess like I understand if you're just saying like it's comforting to me to think that, there is a God watching over me. I just kind of don't share that intuition, I guess. I think like if anything, the idea that like, because I can make sense of the idea that like, yeah, life is shitty because the universe is just indifferent to me. I can make sense of that idea, but adding in the idea that there's some sort of celestial dictator who's always watching over me and who's listening to my thoughts and who's causing me to suffer, that doesn't really make me feel better. I mean, I guess maybe the prospect of going to heaven would be kind of nice, but I'm getting myself cryogenically frozen anyways.
Wouldn't that be awesome though, bro? Me and you playing Xbox Call of Duty in heaven. All we want, we're chilling. I mean, the chat it's not going to be as funny in chat because we're not going to be doing debaucherous stuff in the chat anymore, but it'll still be hilarious.
All right, well, maybe I can move you over to atheism and we can both get cryogenically frozen and play video games together in the year 2255,
No, I don't think that's going to happen. All right.
Do you guys want to move on to questions?
I think so. I feel like that was kind of like closing statements. That felt natural.
Yeah, you can stop the timer there, Pedro. And
gotcha.
We'll move over to the Q&A. So we knew that this would be kind of an interesting debate, more of a conversation than a debate, and we're happy that Mouthy Infidel came on tonight. As everybody knows, we do things a little different at the Crucible. When the debate is over, the moderators can also ask the questions, and oftentimes we write questions down as we go. Tom, if you want to start with any questions you might have, and then I'll come in.
Yeah.
Well, actually, really quick, I wanted to open the floor because I did do a secondary preparation for all the people who wanted to do like a theological thing. So if you want to step up, Andrew, throw that thing in the chat. And then Mouthy, you can witness how, I guess, other people and theists get down and fight each other.
No, we can't do it tonight, man. We've got a bunch of nameums in chat. So if anybody wants to hop on the Discord, I can send it to them that way. But go ahead, Tom.
Okay. So Pedro, I do want to know. Normally, I stopped doing these debates because I felt as though, and I'm only saying this because you said that like you had a goal for somebody to receive God, right, or to receive Christ. So why do you think that somebody should come to Jesus logically?
No, I would disagree. I think, obviously, being a Calvinist, I don't think that people, through reasoning purely, are going to be able to come to Christ. Romans is very clear that people are actively suppressing the truth. If you know what apologetics are, I'm actually supposed to and commanded to by in 1 Peter to come out and provide a defense for the faith that it was within me and always give an answer. If I had to say my ultimate purpose out here is to tell the truth. You guys, I feel like, have been lied to a lot of the times. And it's very unfair that most of the time in my own circles, I will hear I don't need to do anything because it's going to be up to God. I feel like that is the wildest, most irresponsible and stupid theology I've ever heard. It is our job to actually go out and have conversations with people in a loving, graceful manner and actually say, no, this is what we actually believe. And then on the other hand, point out, sir, I think there may be some flaws in what you believe. So that's where that's my whole purpose for this.
For $5, Sassafras says, "Hey BPF, Neo Morai is leaving the online space and wanted to say happy trails to you. Happy trails to you, Neo Morai. Happy trails."
She also asked me to tell you that. I was going to later, but someone else, I guess, beat me to it. But
Okay.
Leaving the online
He was
space.
covering all of her.
What's that?
Just like Twitch politics or like the debate sphere that we all engage in. She's got IRL stuff to move on to.
Yeah,
Oh,
touching
okay.
all the grass and enjoying life is what this commenter said. So we'll pray for Neo Morai as well, and we wish Neo Morai all the luck.
So the point in asking that question is to say that then if we wanted to lead somebody to Christ, we wouldn't be doing this through like a logical frame, correct?
Correct. We're
Okay.
pretty much we're only out here correcting the misrepresentations of the Bible that people have given to us, so that hopefully through that ministry we do reach some people, because like we know, God works all things to the account of His will. So
and then Mouthy, in order for you to, and I'm only bringing this up because Pedro did bring up that like that would be a goal with this conversation. So in order for you to believe in a God, would it need to be through a logical process?
Well, I mean, look, at the end of the day, right, the reason why I need argumentation usually to convince me in the truth of a proposition is just because it's just a descriptive fact about my psychology that forms of argumentation sort of just in a causal sense cause me to come to hold these beliefs, right? So I mean, I'm not going to throw out so there are things that I believe that I don't think that I have arguments for. So for example, the law of non-contradiction is an axiom that I hold to. I don't have an argument for it. I just believe it. And I don't think I need an argument for it, because what's an argument good for anyways? Well, it's just good because it causes me to believe something. But, I just happen to be caused to believe in the law of non-contradiction without argumentation.
Oh, no.
It's just an axiom. It's just a experience that I happen to be ingrained with, right? And so I would just say that, like, is it possible that I come to believe in God without any argumentation? Like, yeah, I mean, if God reached out to me and touched my soul and convinced me that He exists, I would be like, yeah, okay, I guess you exist.
Well, not through argumentation, but through logic, because you are still looking for some sort of evidence or proof that God exists outside. So it still needs some sort of logical formula for you to buy that there is a God, right?
Well, I believe things. So there are propositions that there are certain positions that I believe in that I can't logically justify. Namely, logic itself, right? How do you deductively prove that deduction is valid? Well, you can't. You kind of just have to assume it, right? And so, yeah.
You don't have to though. You don't have to. You could do something else, something critical.
We're gonna get to that.
I would just say that. Okay, so did you say you wanted to sort of cover that argument?
Well, yeah, I want to know like what. If we're not using logic or evidence or proof, then what is an example of what it would take for you to believe in a God outside of those things?
People say that they experience divine revelation where like God reaches out to them and just,
But wouldn't that be evidence?
Yeah, I mean, oh, sure. Well, I mean, if that counts as evidence, then yeah, I do need evidence, right? Like I need something to cause me to believe it, whether that causal factor is just like some sort of divine revelation or some really powerful apologetics argument. Of course, I could come to believe it in a variety of ways. But where I stand right now, I haven't heard any convincing evidence. Well, actually, I'll partially walk that back, because I would say that, like, if I experienced divine revelation, I'm not sure if that would convince me to believe in God even, because then I would just say like, well, clearly there are other people of other religions who had divine revelations, right? Like there are Muslims who claim that they had divine revelation and it caused them to believe in the Muslim God, or well, I mean, I guess it's not a different God, but you know what I mean? Like that particular religion. There are Jewish people who say that they had divine revelations. There are Buddhists or Hindus who say that they had divine revelations that caused them to believe in their particular religion. So, I mean, in the event that I had, sorry, I just wrote a comment. So in the event that I had, experienced something that I interpreted as a divine revelation, I probably would be skeptical of that. I'd probably be like, okay, well, maybe the fact that there's so many different religions who've had the same divine revelation tells me that there's something deeper, some deeper psychological aspect about the experience people have of divine revelation that doesn't necessarily indicate the existence or the truth of a particular religion. But, you know, I don't know. Yeah, I guess I would just need like some sort of convincing argument. Some sort of convincing argument for the existence of God.
Okay.
Pedro. So, with the Bible, what about? Do you know anything about textual criticism?
Mm-mm.
Okay, so you might actually really like this. You should look up this debate between Dr. James White and Bart Ehrman, and it'll take you through pretty much at the highest level, in my opinion, over the reason why the Bible is in fact the text from God, aside from all the others. It'll take you to the peak right there. So Dr. James White versus Bart Ehrman. I would very highly recommend you just listen to that argument, study it, dissect it like I did, and then I'm not saying this will save you, but if you're interested in really knowing the truth, I mean, this is the path to go on, in my opinion, because the reason why I like debate is the truth looks nowhere better than right next to the lie. And in debates, someone's lying, inadvertently or purposely, someone's lying, and then someone is telling the truth.
Okay. Yeah, I'll watch the debate.
Cool. BPF, you have questions?
Yeah, I do. I had a few that I jotted down here. Mouthy, utility for you, is that maximum happiness or something along those lines?
Something along those lines, sure. I will say, like, really quickly, I'm glad we didn't debate. We spent most of the time talking about religion. I'm glad we didn't get into utilitarianism too much, because while I am willing to defend utilitarianism, and while I think my view is pretty close to utilitarianism, I'm not strictly speaking a total utilitarian. Like, it's not. I don't think that exhausts.
Yeah,
you
mix deontological ethics in with kind of your brand of utilitarianism, don't you?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, like there are things outside of strict utility considerations that I care about morally. So, but okay. Yeah.
So my question was just if it provided maximum utils to the most amount of people to believe in God, even if God wasn't real, would you recommend that they do so?
Well, so it would depend on how much more utility it produces, right? Because, so like I said, there are other values that I care about besides just utility. And one of those values is obtaining truth, right? And so all else equal, I think it's better for people to have true beliefs. And even if people believing true things caused some degree of disutility, I still think that it would be best for people to have true beliefs, because there's just something inherently valuable about people believing things that are true. Now, if you scaled up the utility enough, of course, there's some threshold of utility at which point I'm going to say, yeah, it would be better for everyone to believe something that I believe to be false. So, for example, if you were going to say we have two different societies, and in society A, everyone believes the truth, but they are like completely miserable and they basically just like live in hell. But in society B, people all believed a falsehood and everything was like nirvana and everyone lived amazing lives. Then I would say, like, yeah, at that point, the utility justifies people having false beliefs. Yeah.
So if X being utility, whatever that is to you, it doesn't really matter what it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
and utility is the maximum value that you're trying to promote for people, wouldn't it then logically follow that if the maximum utils were reached for people by this belief, even if it was false, that it should be promoted?
So the problem is, so I guess I'm what you would call like a value pluralist. So there are multiple different values that I take into account and weigh against one another when I'm engaging in like moral deliberation. So one of the values that I care about is increasing happiness, maximizing utility. Another value that I care about is obtaining truth and people obtaining true beliefs. And so these are going to have to be weighed against each other. So there is a conceivable scenario wherein if it only created a slightly higher amount of utility for everyone to believe a lie, I would still think it would be better for everyone to believe the truth because people believing the truth is inherently valuable. But if everyone believing a lie created a sufficient degree of negative utility, or if people believing a lie produced a sufficient degree of positive utility, then at that point, I would say there's some threshold at which point I would say it's it would be morally better for everyone to believe the lie.
Got it. Pedro, I had a question for you. In the course of this debate, there was a point where Mouthy was using an elephant as an example of, if I can't justify why this falls, you wouldn't, basically you wouldn't care. So why is the justification for why the earth falls, why is that something that we need to care about?
So 2 points. The first point is just that
I thought he was asking me. Were you asking me, Andrew?
Yeah, I was asking.
Oh, sorry. I thought that was a question from Pedro to me. Sorry.
And we can actually circle back to you too, Mouthy. But
no,
Pedro,
that's okay. I thought that was a question from Pedro
I'm
to
just
me. I
like
didn't
genuinely
realize.
curious if because what he says seems to follow, right? So if he can't justify why the elephant is falling, and you can't just, why is it that he should care, about the earth falling or earth creation, or however you want to frame it, it's all the same thing essentially.
It's a little hard to wrap my head around, I'll be honest. But I would say this. If we're asking why is the earth not falling, wouldn't we like all not care? Because we like the earth is in space, and the thing holding it in place is gravity, right? So
right, but that wasn't.
I don't see
that
how...
wasn't the point of the question. He was just saying, if he doesn't have to justify why X event is happening, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then why is it that from your perspective you claim he needs to justify this event that you claim happened? And if he can't,
okay,
you see what I'm saying? And if he can't, then that
gotcha.
means that somehow he's wrong. Yet he can point at this event that you can't, tell him why this is happening either, right?
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Both sides cannot justify their axioms, is what we were talking about earlier.
Gotcha. Right. So the reason why I think it's important for us to know the why, the purpose, the reason, the ultimate, is because all the suffering, pain, and calamity that we go through would then just be for naught. Whereas on a just objective level of asking if the earth is falling or not, I don't really think that pertains to any, it's a non sequitur, right? I mean, we all here want to know what is the purpose for our lives. We don't really say, what is the purpose for me eating a top ramen earlier today? I mean, no one cares about that. That's like the elephant on the back thing, or that's like the earth falling.
Because your wife hadn't gone to the grocery store yet. I mean, it happens to the best of us, man.
No, what are you talking about?
You got to dig into that top ramen, right?
Well, no, hold on.
I asked for that top ramen, by the way.
The elephant example is only to say that neither one of you can justify your presuppositions. One person can give one extra step, but they can't justify that extra step. And so
mine is the Bible. That's the Bible.
Right.
That's my objective. That's my artifact of revelation.
Right. And how do you justify the Bible, if you can give a succinct answer to that?
How do I justify the Bible? Well,
right.
Okay, so Jay Dyer
Why
actually
you
asked
listen
me
to the Bible.
Yeah, Jay Dyer actually asked me this question, right? And I've been diagramming it out, and I'm displaying it on the screen right now. I don't know if you can see it perfectly, but it's Pedro. He asked, Pedro, why do you know that? And then I answer, obviously, the Bible, the breath of God, which is scriptures. And, usually the Eastern Orthodox, who I've been conversing with a lot, making me think, they ask for, what is the mechanism by which I know all this to happen? And then I would say inspiration. And then I go through this entire diagram where each point of contact, I'm going to the full circle of, it's obviously hinging on God's sovereign decree and the existence of the triune God of Scripture.
Okay,
which
so
brings me back to
it starts with inspiration.
Yeah, inspiration.
Can you justify why you believe that inspiration?
Why do I believe in inspiration?
No, that inspiration.
Well, inspiration is the outpouring of the Holy Spirit in its operation of using men as an instrument in order to transmit God's word to the earth.
Right. Why do you believe that?
Why do I believe that? Because there is a sovereign decree that brings forth all the fabric of reality and time made by the Father specifically.
Where did you get that from?
How does that come about?
No, where did you get that from? Yeah,
he's saying that this can be deconstructed down to the point where you can no longer justify it.
Yeah, so this will go all the way back to God, right? And we'll say God is the reason that we believe all of these other things. But we can't justify the existence of God. We can't prove that the existence of God is actually there. So you can say...
it's a circle thing.
Yeah,
I get it.
Not even a circle thing, but it all starts at the existence of God, really, and then moves forward. And so you have extra steps where you eventually get to the existence of God, but you can't explain past that. Whereas he's saying his stops as well. And you're saying because his stops and he can't justify past that, his is less justifiable or less rational. But because you go extra steps and then can't justify it either, they're actually the same because neither one of you can justify all the way to infinity.
Well, isn't that where we so his starting point as a naturalistic materialist, right, would be void, and then something goes boom, and then everything comes into start, and then as the process goes, we're going back to nothing. My point is saying intelligent being brings forth all creation, has a purpose through all that creation, which succeeds and comes all the way back to him, right?
Right. You're saying yours is more rational or has more rational steps within it.
Well,
but
one
it's
map's
still unjustified at the end.
Well, if I said it, one circle will map onto reality, the other doesn't. How we test that is through which is more consistent.
Right, but that's not the point. The point is that both get to a point where they are unjustified.
I mean, we are at some point operating on faith, correct?
Right, exactly.
In both systems?
Yes.
Okay,
that's their
cool.
point.
Cool.
Yes.
But we can obviously say from here, one is a blind faith and one is a faith that is knowledgeable.
Well, yeah.
Fair?
So Moses sends in the super chat for $5.
Okay.
$5 to support our brother in the faith, Pedro, and his well-spoken infidel opponent. Mouthy, in utilitarianism, how is truth obtained?
Well, I don't think that the normative ethic that you accept is going to have any bearing on by what process we determine what things are true, right? I mean, whether you're a utilitarian or a deontologist, the criteria by which you come to hold true beliefs is going to be the same, right? It's just you abide by certain epistemic axioms and so on. So
earlier he said that everybody has a system to decide how they come to truth for different things, and that there's different systems for different sections.
to be clear, so my point wasn't that everybody has a different epistemic system. I think
Not
basically
that they all have a different system, that they all have systems, and that there
Yeah,
are different types of systems for different sections. So one system
right,
for
yeah.
morality, one system for math, one system for science. Like there's different systems on how we come to truth for different categories.
That's exactly right. So my view is just like there are different domains of discourse. There's like a mathematical domain, there's like a normative domain, there's like a scientific domain, and all of these different domains of discourse have different rules which are internal to them, such that coming to true scientific beliefs are going to be satisfied by scientific reasoning. Coming to truths about mathematics requires using mathematical reasoning. Coming to true normative beliefs requires normative reasoning, and so there are different particular types of reasoning and different truth makers which are internal to different domains of discourse. So yeah, that's what I would say.
Okay. There are questions here from the audience. If you guys got a few minutes and you can field some of them.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
Real quick, I do have a really bad storm here, so just in case I disappear, it's because my power went out.
Gotcha.
We didn't like you anyway, Tom. But thanks for coming on and
I don't like
moderating
me
that.
either.
We appreciate it, even though you were smoking that fucking piece of shit vape. Just go get a pack of Marlboro Reds and be a man.
No. Stop.
This one's good for
What's
me.
with
This
you
one's-
guys? I cannot get a happy medium if
You're
it's
over
either
there smoking cigars, all right? I don't want to hear
Yeah,
it.
you got
like once a month, once a month, like
I don't
once
wanna
or
hear it.
twice a month. Bro.
One cigar is like 10 packs of cigarettes anyways, so you're catching up is what you're doing each time.
Gotcha.
I do have a
Mouthy.
question from Neo if you want to get to that at some point as well.
Who?
From Neo?
Neo Morai?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Neo Morai wanted to know, it said, ask them if belief in an all-powerful good God is significantly more reasonable than belief in an all-powerful evil God. Now, I had answered this by saying that if God's will is what is good, then necessarily he can never do evil. Do you have a different answer from that, Pedro?
I agree. I would just be always more specific. The evil in this world is in existence for the demonstration of God's justice. It's not going to go unpaid for.
So God created evil?
Well, this is
That's what
okay.
you're saying is that God created evil, Pedro.
Well, this is where I say this. What does the Bible say? And directly right here in almost every translation that we can find, right? There is nothing in existence that is in existence outside of God's decree. Can we agree on that, Andrew?
Yeah, but before we get into that, right? I just want you to say that you believe that God's responsible for evil.
Okay. So okay. I'll bite the bullet. God is the one who manifests every single good or bad event in all of creation.
Well, now you're going to have to come to orthodoxy, brother. Anyway, back to
Oh my gosh.
You're done. You're done.
You're a Calvinist, right?
I got
Like-
you.
Well, I'm no. I'm a that's a Calvinist answer. I believe
Yes,
every good
being a Calvinist, you have to believe that God is in charge of all things that ever
Yep.
happen.
Yeah, the
I don't
reason why
believe that.
the reason why I am hesitant is because the language we're using, right? What we're doing is taking a God who stands on a higher plane of existence, whose ways are far above our own, right? And what we're doing is dragging him down to our level and saying, you made evil happen. I think the actual situation is far more complex than that. Is that not fair to say?
Maybe.
I mean, every situation's far more complex than first meets the eye. But I just wanted.
I totally agree.
I don't do
But that's why
apologetics.
we can't just.
I don't do apologetics. I only argue secular arguments. That's all I'm ever going to do, probably. But I did want to see you bite that one, right?
Now that
Take that 50 cal bullet to the face.
Yeah.
Mouthy, I also want to hear your answers. So do you believe that in all good God is more reasonable than an all evil God?
Yeah, I do. Because I think that as an empirical point, there is significantly more suffering than there is well-being in the world. So as such, especially when you take into account like animal suffering and insect suffering, the world is pretty much like hell for most living creatures. And then like some humans have some good times. So I think that, the world we see around us.
Man, that's fucking black pilled as shit, dude.
No,
That's like you just went to the cupboard and got the whole bottle of black pills, man.
I feel like as a Christian, like life is suffering.
Life's only good for some people sometimes. Like, come on, man, it's not that bad. It's not that bad.
I believe that as a Christian, we have to believe that life is suffering. That like that's what it is. So
it's why is it so bad? I mean, think about it this way, guys. I've been through some critical stuff in my life, and here I'll air this part. I'll air this out. With everyone.
Go ahead, but I do want to make sure we get back to Mouthy to finish his answer.
For sure. So, my father, who I love, has reconciled with, and I would die for to this day. When I was young, he beat the hell out of us, right? And what was happening there, I did not understand. I did not know why. I was crying, all that stuff, right? My grandma, who recently passed away, spoke the most, and she was a Christian, spoke the most wise words into my life one day when I was crying, and she came into my room and she said, the reason, Pedro, why you're going through all this is because your father wants you to be a man who is strong in the world. And if you can get past this pain and create it into a footstool rather than a barrier to your life, you will be the better for it.
I'm here for you, Neo.
BPF, my final parting gift before I see.
Was to get Pedro to bite some orthodoxy bullets, buddy. Bite some orthodoxy bullets. Now,
well, here's the bullet that you guys have to bite. You want a bullet?
Nope.
You got. I have a bullet for you. Nope, here, can I play it?
You got to get back.
Hang on, bro.
Finish his answer at some point.
Based homeschool mom also says to Mouthy is asking if you're an agnostic or a deist. She's maybe looking.
He didn't answer the last question yet. I did want to make sure.
Yeah, I know, but this is important. Hang on, just a second. We'll get back to it. I guess she's talking with Jay Dyer. Maybe you guys might want to get into a conversation. But she was wondering if you're an agnostic or a deist. You're muted, man.
You're muted.
It's all Pedro's fault.
Yeah. I would say I'm neither. I think I identify as an atheist, which is just to say that I don't have 100% certainty that God doesn't exist. But I think I find it so improbable that I think it would be accurate to say that I actively hold the belief that God does not exist, that there is no gods. Yeah. So I guess that's what I'd say.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, Mouthy. I just wanted to make sure you got to finish your answer.
Yeah. Oh, so to the last, what was the last question again? I don't remember.
Whether or not you believe it's more likely that we have an all good God or an all evil God.
So I think it's more likely that we have an all evil God because I think that the world for most living creatures is overwhelmingly bad. I think that humans,
evil, right? Not God.
Yeah, I think that human beings, like living in the modern first world, have like lives that, for the most part, probably aren't even worth living. And I think we're at the top of the hierarchy. Like below us are people in the third world, and they have even worse lives than we do. Below them are animals and insects, of which there are way more than humans. Life for them is just complete hell. Yeah, I mean, I think that, the world that we observe is more consistent with an all-evil God than with an all-good God, I would say.
And these are by your standards, not God's standards, correct?
These are just by the standards of, like, what I think people accept when we talk about the concept of something being good, right?
A colloquial understanding.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Colloquial? What?
I mean, animals aren't really suffering. They're just kind of like psychopaths, right? They're like wolves and shit. They're just psychopaths. Right?
Well, they
Isn't
may
that
be.
really what they are?
Well, I think psychopaths. Well, I mean, even if that were the case, I think psychopaths can still suffer.
Well,
Yeah, I mean, fuck them. They're psychopaths. Right?
well, Mouthy, can we get into this conversation? Actually, we were talking about it behind the scenes a little bit. The Mr. Girl thing, right?
Sure.
You said you're agnostic, right?
Agnostic about Mr. Girl?
No.
I'm pretty sure he exists.
No. I know he exists.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like,
As a psychopath. No, I'm kidding. Go ahead.
There is a serious part in Destiny's conversation with Mr. Girl that I actually wanted to ask you about, and it's the part where Destiny actually asked him if God ever appeared in front of him, would he believe that there is a God? And he says, and this is the atheist that I'm used to actually dealing with out in the street when I used to actually like do street street evangelism. There we go. He said, no, even if God appeared right before my eyes in all his glory, I would think I'm tripping and I'm hallucinating and I think this is false. That's a real atheist. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, so, well, yeah, I mean, if I saw God in front of me, I would be like, oh, I'm probably just tripping. But, I mean, I guess I imagine there's a way in which God could appear to me. Like, if God appeared to me and, I don't know, like, reached deep into my soul and was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, I imagine there's some type of experience that I could have such that it would cause me to believe God exists. But if I just, like, I couldn't really describe to you, like, that's just sort of like an intuition. Like, I imagine there's some type of experience that would lead me to believe in God. But, like, if I just, like, saw something and I was like, oh, that looks like God, I would the default assumption would be that I'm just tripping.
Gotcha. Okay. And then do you see how, like, where badly that leads? Like, this is where, in my opinion, I'm not saying every atheist is, a self-professed child sex offender. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. But
Okay.
Isn't that where the worldview leads? If there was enough of him in a certain place in a particular time, that would be their moral system. It's okay.
Well, I don't think that Mr. Girl is a pedophile, and I don't think he's pro child abuse. I actually, this is gonna be the hottest take.
I agree
tonight,
with you.
I don't think that Mr. Girl has any substantive beliefs about the subject of pedophilia that I actually disagree with. I just take Mr. Girl to be saying that child abuse is bad, child porn is bad, child porn should be illegal, child abuse should be illegal, and it should be discouraged. But there's no reason to stigmatize non-offending pedophiles, and in fact, doing so can be kind of harmful. And so I don't think that Mr. Girl actually has any normative prescriptions about the subject of pedophilia that I strongly disagree with.
Would you consider pedophilia to be abnormal?
I would think so. I think just in the sense that most people
so
aren't
hang on. So
pedophiles.
if you
I know
think,
what you're getting at.
if you think it's abnormal, right,
Mhm.
and you want to destigmatize it, wouldn't you be normalizing it?
Well, so when we say destigmatize, we don't mean that we want to say that it's okay to molest children, or that it's normal, or that it should be socially acceptable to molest children. The point is just that we want to create an environment where we're saying, look, yes, child molestation is bad. We want to do whatever we can to prevent it from occurring. And so we want to create a situation where, yes, we are acknowledging that pedophilia is bad, or that child molestation is bad, but we're trying to create an environment such that non-offending pedophiles who need help feel comfortable to seek therapy and get the help that they need, so that they don't end up harming any children.
But non-offending pedophiles are still pedophiles, right?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, and that you just said that that's abnormal.
Mhm.
But if you want to get rid of the stigma, that would be normalizing it.
I don't think so.
Yeah, how would it not be a normalization of pedophilia? If I were to ask you if you wanted to get rid of the stigma against homosexuals and you said yes, and then I said, to normalize it, wouldn't you say yes?
Okay.
Normalizing it would be making it acceptable and making it to where
Right.
more
Well,
people
but
could do this in
how
the
is that
open.
not making it acceptable?
Oh, so we would be making pedophilia acceptable. Like
right.
we would be
Yes.
saying
Yes.
so
That's
really
right.
quick,
I got it.
Wait, I
I
don't want to get clipped out of
knew it.
context though. So what I'm saying is that we would be saying that it's not necessarily bad. It doesn't necessarily make you a bad person that you have pedophilic urges, but it is bad to molest children. It's bad to harm children. It's not bad to have that desire. And we want a situation wherein people who have that desire are seeking the help that they need so that they don't actually end up harming children.
Yeah, no, I get it. But the problem is that if you consider a person to be a pedophile who molests children, and you consider a person to be a pedophile who does not molest children, but just has the urge to molest children, and then you say that you want to get rid of the stigma against people who want to but don't, you're still normalizing pedophilia. I don't see how you can like evade from that.
So well, look, I think this is just going to come down to a semantic. I wasn't understanding what you're saying. Like, if by normalize pedophilia, you only mean what I just said. So when you say, do you want to normalize pedophilia? And by normalize pedophilia, you just mean create an environment where pedophiles feel comfortable seeking the help that they need so that they don't end up harming children, and where we're not necessarily saying that you're a bad person just because you have pedophilic urges that you can't control. If that's what you mean by normalize, then yes, I do advocate for that, for normalization in that sense. But I guess when you said normalization originally, I sort of interpret that as like, do you want to make it seem morally acceptable to molest children? And of course, I would not argue for that.
No, I'm not saying that you would argue for that. I'm just saying that if that's both to be pedophiles, and you want the stigma to go away for the non-offending pedophiles, and you are trying to normalize pedophilia.
Sure, if that's what you mean by if what you mean by normalized pedophilia is what I said,
don't know.
Then yes,
I don't know how else it could be explained.
The way that I originally interpreted it was just, by normalized pedophilia, we mean we make it culturally acceptable that, like, the idea that there's nothing wrong with harming children.
Right.
But if that's not what you mean, then yes, I do agree with you that we should normalize pedophilia.
Well, Mouthy, can we go back for a second really quick? It's weird to me when people say non-offending pedophiles, right? And then you describe to me further, and then you say this person has never actually been in a has never actually sexually abused a child. In my eyes, when you say that, okay, that guy's not a pedophile, and then when I run through a scenario which I think is very real, where, for example, a guy
I
in the mall.
explained this earlier, the difference between a pedophile and a child molester.
There's a difference?
Yes, a pedophile is one who just has an attraction to prepubescent children. A child molester is someone who actually molests children.
Right.
So just having the urge doesn't mean that you're actually touching children. It just means that you have the urge. You have the attraction.
Yeah, so you want to normalize pedophilia. You don't want to normalize child molestation.
Correct.
But of course, normalizing pedophilia most certainly isn't going to lead towards normalization of child molestation, right? Because
there are levels.
I actually think the opposite.
These things just never go in a straight line, do they?
Well, no. I would argue
real time yet, right?
Them getting help more easily means that hopefully there will be less children molested, right? So it would actually do the opposite of that.
So there's actually substantial evidence that, look, there's a very straightforward logic to it, which is just like, look, when we stigmatize pedophilia more, then non-offending pedophiles feel more internal guilt. They feel on the inside like, oh, I'm a monster. Nobody can ever find out about what I am.
They are fucking monsters.
But firstly, I would say,
bro, they're monsters. They
would never
children. They're monsters.
I would say that you are a bad person if you molest a child. But I'm not comfortable morally condemning somebody because they just have a particular desire, even if they don't act on it.
Why not?
If we just have somebody who who was born and just, or, you know, maybe they were, because a lot of pedophiles, they themselves were molested as children, or maybe for some people it's a genetic thing. So if we just have somebody who is either born with an attraction to child, or they developed it in adolescence because they were molested or something like that, and so they just have this urge to harm children, but they never act on it. In fact, they're such a moral person that they never go around children. They actively seek therapy so that they can avoid harming children. They never put any children at risk because they realize that it's wrong to harm children. I don't think that's an immoral person. I think that's a moral person who had an unfortunate set of desires that they were bestowed upon, but they're dealing with those desires in a moral way because they're not allowing it to cause them to harm other people. But with respect to the effects of destigmatizing pedophilia, the argument is just this is the straightforward argument. It's if when pedophilia is stigmatized, pedophiles feel more internal guilt. They feel like they're monsters. They feel all this guilt. Them feeling this guilt leads them less likely. Well, it's not good because it's not good because I don't think they're necessarily immoral. I don't think they deserve to suffer. But it's also not good because really quickly, just to finish this.
We need to straighten this up, though. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, but let him go. Let him finish.
So the point is just that when they feel this internal guilt, they're less likely to come out. They're less likely to see a therapist because they feel this internal guilt, right? You're not going to see a therapist for something because you're too ashamed to let anyone know about it. And you know, that internal guilt, which leads to them not seeing a therapist, makes them more likely to offend, right? Because obviously one of the main ways in which we can get pedophiles not to offend people is by getting them the help that they need so that they can deal with these urges in a healthy way. And stigmatizing pedophilia counts against that. So, yeah.
So Mouthy explains things in a very, very, very wordy way. So I like to try to condense them down real quick. BPF, do you believe it's okay to like condemn somebody for an immutable characteristic or like something that they did that they couldn't help, or a characteristic about them that they can't help?
Absolutely not. And I don't believe that pedophilia is an immutable characteristic.
Okay. So that's where the disagreement would be.
Mm-hmm.
But
just
Tom,
like I don't believe homosexuality is an immutable characteristic.
Yeah. Because, Tom, this is what I feel like, and I'm not saying you're on that side.
Now, by the way, before anybody fucking goes apeshit, hang on. Before anybody goes apeshit, I mentioned these two things as being things I don't consider immutable characteristics. I wasn't conflating them and saying one is the other. Wasn't trying to do that. Before anybody freaks the fuck out, I wasn't saying anything like that.
Of course.
All right. What I feel like this argument that the other side is proposing is doing is unnecessarily opening your chest up for a giant spear to come through it because of this one factor. I don't think anybody is a pedophile until they actually commit the act, have gone through trial, and have said, yes, he did do that, right? What you guys are now parroting...
But do you think gay if they never had sex with a man, even if they're only attracted to men?
No, I don't think that person's gay. He's not acting upon...
Definitionally, these would be incorrect, though. That's not how we use these words.
Well, definitionally, we can make up whatever fucking definitions we want.
You can,
so we can.
We can make up whatever fucking definitions we want as long as we agree with what they are, can't we, Tom?
Well, as somebody in pragmatics, what we try to do is take what an underlying understanding that people have about these words and apply that to the way that we use them.
Okay, well, let's look at how people pragmatically look at homosexuality. If you fuck in as a man, you're homosexual, and if you don't, you're not. That's how they pragmatically look at it, don't they, Tom?
I don't think so. I think somebody would say,
think so. You think they
if I said, yes, hold on. If I said, I want to go have sex with that dude over there, he is so hot, you would say, dude, you're gay. But I didn't do anything. I didn't have sex with him. So why am I gay just because I want to have sex with him?
Okay. You said that you had a desire to do that, right?
Uh-huh. Yes.
Meaning that you would have sex with him, right?
No, it's the desire that makes them gay. Not what I would do or what I have done, but it's the desire that makes them gay.
What is desire?
We could think of really quick. So I think the point that Tom's making is true, right? So for example, we could imagine somebody, no attraction to women, thinks women are gross, loves men, is hyper attracted to every man they see, has a strong desire to have sexual intercourse with men. However, this person is like raised in a traditionalist, religious family.
Christian household.
Right. So they would never have sex with a man, but they super want to. They're only attracted to men, but they wouldn't have sex with a man. I mean, that person's obviously gay. I mean, just like
no, he's not gay. He's not gay. He's a man.
Okay.
Look, you describe him as gay, but we would describe him as a guy who is not dominated by his desires.
Tell me, what is the problem with the definition of saying that you're not gay unless you engage in homosexuality?
There's no problem. Like, we can make up whatever definitions we want. I would just say that the definition. I would just say that the definition you guys are using isn't the definition that everyone else is using. That's all.
I think it is. I think that our definition of you want to bone dudes or you're boning dudes.
No, come on.
Homosexuality
is
okay.
Just
Hold on. Because you guys already admitted that that's not the definition you're using. If I say I like that guy, he's hot, you would call me gay. So that
we call you gay because we're bros and we're just messing with you. We don't actually think you're gay.
No, you would call me. No, but if I thought that guys were hot, yes, I would.
Yes,
be gay.
because the inference is that you want to have sex with them.
No,
yes,
well, but yes,
desire.
you want.
So if you want to have sex with them, you would have sex with them.
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Matter,
so what if like BPF? What if Pedro pilled you on not smoking anymore? Pedro convinced you not to smoke, right? And you decided, all right, for the sake of my long-term health, never smoking again. Don't you think we could say that you, straight edge Andrew, would want to smoke, but they wouldn't do it, right?
But Andrew's not a smoker anymore. That's the point, right?
Well, but he wants to.
So, okay, so I see. So you're saying if I want to, so what happens if I have like a relapse?
Well,
now, now let me ask you this: if you don't smoke, Mouthy, aren't you called a non-smoker?
Well,
yes,
sure.
Would you call somebody who doesn't smoke a smoker?
That's not his point, though. His point is that your desire doesn't mean that that's what you are actually doing, or that
that's our fucking point.
We're just saying. I'm just saying that. I'm just saying that
exactly our point, Tom, is that your desire to do the thing doesn't make you the thing. It's doing the thing that makes you the thing.
No.
Your desires do not dictate your character. It's your actions.
But my point is that
these labels only describe the desires. That's all they're describing.
Fucking
pedophilia, being gay.
You're the worst moderator ever, Tom.
Yeah, me and Tom are just saying that on the one
I'm moderating to tell you you're wrong.
So on the one hand, my point with the smoking thing is just to say that there's not some necessary entailment. Like you can have a desire to do something without it being the case that you would do that thing. But what me and Tom are saying is that when we're talking about the concept of homosexuality, how it's generally defined is we're just like homosexuality is same-sex attraction, right? It's not like, there can be a gay person who's never had sex with a man.
You don't define it that way. You define it as same gender attraction.
Okay, sure, but like, but I'm just saying, like, it's about the attraction.
So
right?
That's bullshit. Right off the gate, you're full of shit, Mouthy. You define it. You don't even define it as same sex. So
but the
like your shit's like all out there.
We're just talking about that. The point is just that it's the attraction that's relevant, not the actual act of having sex. Like, because by your definition, like no virgin could ever be gay or straight. But I mean, I just think that's not how people use the term.
But here, let's just work with a real life scenario. Regular dude walking through the mall, sees a girl, walks up to her, says, "Hey, I think you're attractive. My name is such and such. Would you like to go out sometime?" She informs him, "Oh, I am 17, still in high school. I'm sorry, I cannot, obviously interact with you." He says, "Oh, my bad, mistake," and walks away. Is that man a pedophile?
She would have to be prepubescent. She's not prepubescent. She's 17 years old. We're talking about people who are like 11 years or younger.
So that's one part. That's one part is that like generally if you're just attracted to like 17 or 16-year-olds, that's generally not like pedophilia. Like pedophilia has to be prepubescent. But another point is just that I don't think, oh man, do I even want to go here? I don't think that it's enough to be attracted to like one underage like even if pedophilia was defined that way, I don't think it would be enough to be attracted to like one underage person before you find out that they're underage.
That's the thing that Mr. Girl convinced me of, is that pedophilia isn't a binary. It is more of a spectrum. And I like that surprised me that he actually
throw the whole spectrum into hell, dude. No,
everything's a fucking spectrum, man. Fuck. Yeah. Can't we just be concise about some shit? You know what I mean? Like, here's something. Let's just all agree on this. We'll make it easy.
It makes
right?
us more
You
concise to call it
can't
spectrum.
fuck kids, right? That's easy. We'll just all
Yes.
agree that that's true,
Sure.
and that's good enough.
Very simple.
We've ended up on a happy point of agreement. We shouldn't
Mouthy
have sex with
Infidel,
children.
please shout out your channel one more time.
Yes, I'm famous anti-child abuse YouTuber, anti-raping kid YouTuber, Mouthy Infidel. You can find my channel at Mouthy Infidel, or you can find my Twitter at Mouthy Infidel. Yeah.
We always enjoy having Mouthy on. It's his third debate on the Crucible. He usually comes on and does serious ass kicking. This was a little tamer than he's used to, but for some reason, Mouthy and Pedro like each other. Who the fuck knew? Tom.
Well, I think it would be an awesome event for God to actually reach into his life and then he become my brother in Christ, and I think that would be awesome because we would kick so much butt on the internet. Because think of it this way, Mouthy. This is the thing. You guys like the colloquial. When you guys said colloquial, I was like, "What the heck? What does that mean?" All this stuff. So you could be like one of my like I have nerds who are Bible geeks who know all kinds of stuff that I don't even know. And they'll say, "Oh, they're just talking about this." And then I'll look back at the person who said the complicated thing. It's like, "Well, why didn't you just say that? Why do you have to do this big fancy thing? Why don't you just speak straight to me? I feel like you're selling me a car right now."
Tom.
Yeah.
Shout out your channel, buddy.
For the sake of the audience, before I do, Mouthy, can you answer one question with a yes or no for me?
Yes.
Was there any issues that you had with the presentations from Pedro? I don't know what y'all's agreements were ahead of time.
No, it's totally fine. No
Okay,
worries.
good. My name's Tom. I go by Tomfoolery. I stream on YouTube under youtube.com/Tomfoolery Show. I do all sorts of stuff, drama coverage, debate coverage, debate coaching, mostly getting into like what we mean when we say certain words or use certain phrases and trying to clear up what it is that people are actually saying when they are talking to each other. I'm streaming right now, and I will be streaming all night into the morning. I stream almost every day, and we'd love to have all of the Crucible followers over here. I appreciate you guys having me on.
Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe. Everybody watching this video who wasn't able to see it tonight, and there's always many, make sure you get over and subscribe to these two guys' channel. They both have very interesting content. Tomfoolery will be back, I believe, New Year's for the New Year's Trash Talk Extravaganza because they're just a lot of fun to do, aren't they, Tom?
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, have a great night, everybody. Take care.